All right, guys. 30 seconds. You can hear the music. Star Citizen Live is back. First one of the year. A 2-hour episode with Benoit. Don't know how it's going to go. I'm actually going to lower the music. It's probably way too loud. Don't know how it's going to go. Don't know if it's going to be game development's hard. Don't know if they're really going to touch on their plans for the year or whatever. But let's see. Let's see what happens. We're watching it live like CitizenCon.
Hi there.
Hey, Jared.
We're back.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Take a moment and accept that this is my actual face. I apologize to any children and small animals that it may frighten. It's my parents' fault. So I've got a little bit of a speech here before we begin. Let's see if I can get through it without messing up.
Ooh, okay.
It's a new year, and those that have followed the project for a while can tell you that the first couple months of any year at CIG is a period of examination, of planning, and of taking those triumphs and lessons alike from the previous year and using them to chart an improved and refined way forward for the continuing development of Star Citizen and Squadron 42. So far, so good. And this year, we've set the focus of those efforts early with December's letter from the chairman, where CEO and founder of the company, Chris Roberts, stated his intention to evolve both the existing patch release cadence and the content within for Star Citizen away from the previous new feature-laden model and into a more content-driven and stability-focused endeavor. So,
and then you did the opposite at the start of the year.
What the hell does that really mean? Does it mean that we wave a magic wand and it all gets better in a single monthly patch like last week's 401? No, of course not. Does it mean holding patches back for 3, 4, 5 months at a time and with no new content until there's a perfect release? Not quite, because we still need to make new stuff to feed the beast, and as many of you already know,
who's the beast?
PTU and Tech Preview have their valuable and essential uses, they will still never reach the concurrency numbers of Live Alpha. And it is all too often the stresses of that high concurrency Live Alpha that ultimately reveal the true underlying sources of problems beneath for a project like this.
Yep.
So,
it's true.
If patches are going to keep coming no matter what, then what's actually changing this year? So like everything else in Star Citizen, I'm certain this too will continue to expand and mature as we move throughout
How's
the
year. Volume, guys?
But in its simplest terms, what this means is pulling engineers and programmers off of a lot of the new fancy feature work they've always been on and putting them on less sexy but more quality of life driven efforts like rebuilding elevators and transit to better work with the realities of server meshing, fixing issues where your hangar eats your ship and your cargo disappears, finally introducing some version of unique item recovery as quickly and as efficiently as we can, and much, much more. It means a greater focus on refining the gameplay that's already there in the persistent universe, and less time spent on continuously introducing the instability of a multitude of brand new features every 3 months or so.
Okay.
It also means a new content and gameplay delivery schedule intricately tied to the introduction of new ongoing story narratives for the persistent universe that allow you as players to reshape the galaxy around you, beginning with 401, and the faction warfare that will change Pyro by the end of this year. So what? No more new features?
Okay.
No. It just means that we're going to continue to work on new gameplay like resource network, crafting, and base building in the background.
We don't want story narrative right now,
more
though.
Deliberately and with more time to cook. It means these new features not coming out as quickly as originally planned, because the same super talented engineers and programmers that used to be working on those will now be focused on fixing what's essentially already there first. And when these new features are ready to do so, they'll go into expanded, dedicated tech preview testing instead of the PU to ensure their functionality and stability. Ultimately, this year is a recommitment to our desire to make Star Citizen a place where everyone can live out their sci-fi dreams, whether they're industrial, commercial, civil, impartial, or controversial, simply about traversal or other people's dispersal, but always universal and hopefully with little to no reversal. And to do so with an ambitious monthly patch cadence, focused on content, not features, that we hope brings with it a new places to go, new things to do, and new fixes to the issues that have often hampered the experience in the past.
Monthly. Okay.
I got cute there for a minute, so I'm just going to explain it again just to be clear. Monthly patches with little to no brand new features causing brand new instabilities, instead full of progressive bug fixes and refactors that will build over time, and with new story-driven content primarily utilizing game systems already in place that will continue developing the stories of Stanton and Pyro and beyond, of factions and sandworms and science run amok and more, including
But
new
that
game,
requires
in-game
the mission
adventures
team.
and discoveries along the way. And that last part is super relevant to you and me and our relationship.
What
And
about the
why
mission
I'm talking
refactor?
so much right now. Quiet. That's not true. I've never needed a reason to talk this much. With this next evolution of Star Citizen's development, meaning a more content-driven, in-universe experience, and with big feature work taking a back seat to fixing what's already there and then moving into the public tech preview development environment once it's ready farther down the line, so too must our weekly video offerings change. And to preserve that discovery of new story, to evade spoiling the outcome of new content, and to avoid doing 5 weeks of consecutive shows that all basically say, every engineer is working on elevators in transit right now, we're making changes to the weekly ISC and SCL content and cadence.
This is not
So
going
like
to be fun.
everything else that continues to evolve and change as the year goes on, we'll be bringing Inside Star Citizen and Star Citizen Live together on Thursdays. We're going to be adding a new Behind the Ship series and alternating between them as the stories we want to tell each week demands.
Okay.
For instance, last week was BTS Fortune on Tuesday. This week, we're having Chief Technology Officer Benoit Beausejour, who's sitting patiently to my right here on SEL, for an in-depth chat about 4.0 preview, why it was done and how it helped the project, how we used to work, how we're going to work going forward, answer questions about this new focus on stability going forward, and I've even pulled an extensive list of JIRAs that we're going to go over to find out what the heck is really going on with some of these persistent bugs.
Okay.
And then next week, you'll get another BTS show on the upcoming Super Hornet Mark II on Tuesday, and then an ISC on Thursday, where we'll dive deeper into what the content-driven side of this new initiative really means.
Okay,
We're going to recap the story so far and look at how the storylines of the Precision Universe will begin to take shape later this year.
But the content means save Stanton stuff, which
We haven't even started
I
yet.
almost missed my mouth.
I'm not enjoying.
So like the recent cancellation
narrative
of the
side
Lunar
of
New Year
it.
free flight was done to avoid further destabilizing the current Star Citizen experience for our players, this change to our programming will provide a multitude of benefits for our players and developers, allowing us to preserve the full experience of the content work for a proper in-game discovery by you, but just as importantly, letting the devs keep much of their focus, frankly, where we all think it should be, on making Star Citizen and Squadron 42 everything we all want it to be. And with fewer distractions by me, the guy they've all come to fear and dread whenever I walk over to their desk. Except you. You don't get to escape. You're mine.
Wait, he has no legs.
Now, there will still be videos dedicated to the making of Star Citizen, just fewer than before. There will still be new ships added to the verse. Most will just use existing gameplay systems to avoid creating instability wherever possible. There will be more patches than ever before. Approximately
can't
once
run,
a
yeah.
month. We're currently counting about 10 over the course of the year, full of bug fixes and new story-driven content, and there's going to be fewer big-ticket features that we're used to in the past being introduced until things are shored up. In short, too late. It's going to be a very interesting year to
Engineering,
be certain. And
crafting,
this is
base
a lot
building.
of talk, to which I'm just going to say, yeah, this is a talk show. It's what we do on SEL. The ultimate proof of these efforts will be seen little by little, month after month, over the course of this entire year. And we hope you'll join us and continue to support us on this new adventure towards a more stable universe.
All of
So with
CitizenCon?
that, I'm going to take a drink and we'll get started with the show proper. Roll the cue card. The top.
The what? Okay.
I thought about pre-recording it, but I didn't.
He did good. You
doing
didn't
it
need
live.
to.
Oh, one take Huckabee. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Star Citizen Live. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, well, this is a really interesting one to start on. This is our special edition of More Stable Universe episode with me and Chief Technology Officer Benoit Beausejour. Benoit, I've been talking too much. Say something.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing, Benoit?
I'm good. I'm good.
He's
So
got his
for anyone
laptop.
who doesn't know you,
He's
let's
reading
start us
chat.
off. Explain who you are and why you're the person that's here talking to
Okay.
us today
All right.
on this show.
So I'm the Chief Technology Officer, or as the acronym means, Chaos Team Organizer. And so my job is to now lead the engineers in their development efforts, but also in the development of the Star Engine and also both games, right? To make sure that engineers know what they have to do, that they have the tools to do it, and that they have the right priorities overall based on the two projects.
So this show is going to go a bit longer than normal. We're going to break it into a couple different sections. We're going to talk about a few different aspects of development. And then for the latter half of the show, we are literally going to bring up Jira's on my screen, and we're going to talk to him about all the most pressing bugs. Well, not all of them, but many of the most pressing bugs, and find out what the heck's going on.
Okay.
But before we get to that, I want to talk about how we used to work, then talk about this big change that's going into effect this year.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. So let's start with the old ways. Let's start back at the end of last year with 4.0 and the 4.0 preview. Over the last 2 months, we've seen a lot of opinions online about how that went and why we did things the way that we did. So,
I mean,
you tell us.
My
why
only
did we
thing was no
choose,
transit refactor. Why?
What did we learn from 4.0? 4.0 was in testing for 3 months before it went to preview, and then we left it on for another month and a half. How did this process go?
Well, so during the development of 4.0, there was a lot of new technology coming on, right? So it's a major patch that changes a lot of the fundamentals. Obviously, throughout the year, we've been developing server meshing. We've done tech previews on server meshing. And so getting to the end of that process, basically exiting the tech preview streams, coming back with the 4.0 content, was a major endeavor to synchronize all that, make sure the new content that was produced fit with the technology or that it was working. Even results that we got with the 3.24 release, for example, were completely, obscured by the new content, right? And so at the end of the year, we took a decision to split the two releases, right? So
leave 3.24 up.
Correct.
Put 4.0 in a preview.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because as we were getting closer to the end of the year, right, and it's time's running out, what we knew from the integrations is that
I'm going to turn it up
patch
again.
was not quite ready because we needed more concurrency on it to discover more issues. And we were kind of at the maximum of what our PTU concurrency could actually deliver. And so, but we knew it wasn't ready for a live release because, we want to be fair with our assessment of where the patch was at. We knew there was some egregious issues that we have yet to discover. I'll talk a bit later about the fog of war of crashes. And so we decided to go with the lesser of known of the two problems, which was leave 3.24 live for players to enjoy it in a stable release, right?
Stable. I don't think it was very stable.
To a 4.0 preview. Now, since we had taken the decisions months ago that the 4.0 patch was going to be a full wipe, that gave us the ability to basically preview the patch, but allowing you guys to keep your persistent progress in the preview as we move up to, at some point, bring 4.0 on the live environment. So overall, I think that was a very difficult decision to do this option for us, but I think it was the best for the project because it allowed us to de-risk a little bit the .0 initial release, which had a lot of issues even during the preview. A lot of the Skeleton Crew teams worked throughout the break to actually document, hotfix some of those issues as well, and help players that got into weird situations, and start the ball rolling for the year with already important fixes to the underlying technology.
So 2 follow-up questions to what you just said. You said that the clock was ticking.
Yeah.
What clock? Did 4.0 have to go out before December?
Good question.
That itself is a decision that was questioned by many people, internally and externally. What is this clock you were talking about?
Well, in this case, it's like our project is different from other game projects in that we need to release the code at some point to be able to move on to bigger projects. And the PTU is a great process.
What does that mean?
But it does have its limits. At some point, we gain nothing from additional PTU builds because things function well at that level of concurrency.
Okay.
And we need way more concurrency to go up. Even when we plan patches, we know at which moments in the PTU we'll have concurrency, and we try to maximize those. For 4.0, we kind of ran out of gas of attention.
Yeah. Nobody wants to
so we needed to
play in
get
PTU.
this additional hump over
the edge
to get the technology out, bigger concurrency, and the ability to fix it.
They don't communicate
in
this
order
way
to then plan for the release.
as it's approaching live.
So you said things run well. Not everything was running
It's all
well,
marketing,
but
at that point.
it's what we've said before. It's what I said at the beginning of the show. Sometimes you can't find those underlying problems that are causing it to run less than well until you get that concurrency up.
Correct.
So to that end, wouldn't it have made more sense to just take 324 down and force everybody into 4.0 like we've done every other December in the past?
Right, that
honestly,
was
probably.
our typical decision. Typically, was to just go for
In
it,
hindsight,
right? In this
just
case,
go for it.
I think shows a change of mentality, which is that we're trying to respect our live environment.
But I got to do Save Stanton,
and so
on more
the decision
accounts
was taken to
this
just
way.
allow players to keep playing 324 as even a fallback or as their primary play environment if they preferred.
And a lot of people are
while
playing
you
on
could
it, believe
jump
it or
on the
not.
Preview experiment, and then just see, try the new content out, but then always have your stable experience to go back to.
But realistically,
Sure.
and for the next couple of hours, you're going to get a lot of questions.
I know, sure.
Who in their right mind was going to log into 324 with
People
4.0
did.
sitting right there?
There were people in chat
who
every
drives
time.
up to Disneyland
Sure.
and with Disneyland right there goes to California Adventure instead? Did we actually? Was anything gained by doing this, really?
Yeah, overall, throughout the break, right, during the 4.0 preview, there was actually a fairly large contingent of players still playing 324.
Yeah,
Now,
there were.
It might have been because of some of the issues at launch, right? So they fall back on the 324 batch, right? Which was a bit the safety net that we wanted to provide. But you're right, of course, we were banking on the fact that people would go on the 4.0 preview to give us that concurrency. But at the same time, we wanted to give them an escape hatch.
Sounds a little bit like we were trying to have our cake and eat it too.
A little bit, but I think it allowed
us to have our cake and eat it
too. We would have just
too.
gone with the 4.0 live at the end of December, which would have been a major issue, and a lot of players wouldn't have been able to play during the break.
Okay. So we made this decision. What did we gain from it? Over the holidays, over the second half of December and all through January until 401, what did we gain from running these two separate environments?
Well, we've been able to actually do a lot of live comparisons of the two workloads, which was very interesting. In fact, obviously the 4.0 preview workload was bigger than the 324 one, but we were kind of able to compare both. We did gain the ability to fix early some of the most egregious issues that would have been a real complete disaster otherwise, right? That showed up with the concurrency. I'll talk a bit more about those. Actually, we're going to dive into that quite a bit. And so what we've gained is the ability to provide a test environment that was bigger while allowing players to keep an escape hatch and then compare both builds.
Yeah, they can't do this again
That's
unless they do another wipe.
324. And I wanted to get that out of the way. But let's go back to just 4.0.
They can only do that because they wiped.
4.0 started testing, I think it was in Evocati in October. Went to Wave 1 in November. We left it in Tech Preview over December and in January. That's about 4 months.
Yeah.
That's about 4 months of testing.
Evo, PTU, they get burned out.
Fix anything?
Oh yeah.
They fixed a ton of shit.
Here's the thing. I know what the answer is. I'm being a little cheeky with you and everything. But it's hard not to look at the community and look at the sentiment, look at YouTube and Twitch and Spectrum and Reddit and everyone
When
else.
the elevators don't work, it doesn't matter if you
took a real cursory first glance, it looked like, what the F were we doing for 4 months?
Sure.
They fixed the paint on the C8R or something, you know?
Well, so September, October, November, December, right? So since September,
and again,
we
do
started
you know
the real
if you
Vocati in
fixed them
October,
or not
correct?
is the real question.
So for these 4 months, the majority of the development was aimed at finishing the features to make sure that they were server meshing compatible. So we still had a server meshing playtest at the beginning of October, right? That was the final one before we actually reintegrated the streams. And so
basically, they mark things
then
fixed that
came
aren't
some
fixed. So
realizations.
that's my issue.
We were very happy with some of the tests that we've done. We've identified all the issues with our server meshing tests. We knew what we had to do. And then we came back to the main line from the 324 content, and we started running server meshing in Pyro. And major issues started to show up. When we started the PTU at beginning of October, the first PTU was an absolute disaster. All of the metrics that we had captured in 324 And we were like, yeah, these look good. We're
Thank you,
completely off
Sweezy.
the charts with the 4.0 content. Same technology, same code base, but completely new content. And so we realized that the size of the levels were different. The way the content was created was a bit different. And that had major implications on the streaming and replication systems. And so if some of you guys were part of the first couple of EvoCaddy builds, or large PTUs in October, the network performance was absolutely horrendous because, and I can jump into an anecdote. I do have my notes because we've got a long show to go through, so I'm going to be referring to some of those. But basically, there was a new change in the engine where we tried to optimize some of the way we deal with streaming radius. And streaming radius is a bit of a problem in every game, right? Or it's basically the radius of objects, and you decide what you're going to load based on your viewpoint, which is a typical issue in games, right?
And ours needs to be very far
Star
away.
Citizen, it is a much bigger impact because the streaming radius actually affect what your client is going to load in, what the hybrid, which is the replication server in the middle, needs to replicate, and what the game server is going to also have to provide, right, and simulate. And so there was an issue resulting from one of the engine optimizations where, now I'm going to say the final solution, not the how we got there. We had to investigate this for several days to find it. But basically, the way we compound and aggregate objects would actually inflate the bounds of things. And so the new locations in Pyro would actually have a radius of several 100,000 kilometers. And so basically what the result was every game client in Pyro was basically binding a very large part of the environment. And that created the work on the hybrid service, which needs to replicate this data upwards of 15 to 20 megabits per client across. Megabits, yeah, which is, in the case of our messaging, is substantial. And so obviously, in those cases, interaction lag up the wazoo, nothing was functional. And so we lost several amounts of times there, but we learned a couple of lessons, which are going to inform some of the changes we'll be doing this year. But so that was the beginning of the 4.0 journey, right? Mm-hmm. The first build, where we were coming in confident from our tests, first PTU, what's going on, right? And so
it's another thing that couldn't be discovered until scaled up.
Correct. And then, well, in this case, it's a combination of scale and content, right?
With the content scaled up.
Yeah, well, in this case, it's literally scaled up, which caused the streaming problem, right? So that's a quick anecdote. What else we've been doing on starting from there was we've established our player counts for launch, right? So from the testing,
500, 600, whatever.
We decided to shoot for a 500 player shard with basically a 500 what we call soft cap and 600 player cap, which gives us some flexibility in matchmaking players on and off. That number felt good for several reasons: performance, but also and headroom, but also the ability for the game itself to support that amount of players. So the amount, I've talked about this before in some of my server meshing reports, but the amount of gateways we have for hangars,
elevators,
how many hangar holes are there around stations, right, for you to be able to get out without a big queue, things like that. With more players right now, the game wouldn't support it properly. So that was we've established those numbers.
Okay, well, what are you going to do about it in the future? Because 500 is not enough.
Finalize the latest elements that we've identified during the test to launch. So I've talked about network bind optimizations before, so that had to be completed. So this was a full, solid month of work to keep optimizing the network bind so that we stopped having these quick stalls. Mm-hmm. That was a very large one. Another piece of this was the teleport API. Now, I know that sounds, what is this magic, right? In a normal game server, teleporting objects is very simple because the server has all the entities in memory and you're like, just move there. Our teleport API needs to support cross-server teleportation of an object, right? So an object that's in Stanton technically can be teleported through the APIs on another another server in the shard. And so the teleport API had to be kind of finished. There are several systems that use this. For example, common example is if you die and we need to respawn your character, we need to move your player. from where he died to where he needs to respawn. And
that's
that
on
can be
another server.
completely anywhere, right? So we don't know what game server will have it. And so in this case, the teleport API had to be kind of finished. So that's part of the work that was done in those 4 months for launch. The other one was the territory
This was for
configuration.
launch.
So if you followed the
So we have
development
this already.
during the last couple months, we went at some point from the typical small shard of like 2 servers and 400 players, and at some point we exploded the size of the shards. That's because our new territory configuration came into play, and that's how we were able to experiment and come to the final level of the shards that we have now, which is basically we have 5 servers on each side of the star system. So each star system has its own space server. We call it a space server for now. It's just a cool name because they treat the open space and the jump gates. But then after that, every major planet has its own game server that's dedicated to its zone. And so that really opened the shards up, and we were truly now in full server meshing mode. Obviously, a lot of issues came from that, not from the configuration, but from having more servers would have ripple effects on how the entity and the game would actually behave. So we had to touch that. We also identified something that we were not able to finish for 4.0, which was the culling of instance interiors. So, and I'll talk a lot more about hangars later, but basically, when you hear someone in another hangar, that's network instance calling, right? So we'll talk about that in a bit.
We've all heard and dealt with that one.
One of the big fears that we had for 4.0 was that, of course, it's the debut of server meshing. It's a brand new, deployment for the game. It's a lot of technology change, but there's always a subtext that performance is going to get better if we go server meshing, right?
Yeah.
And
it
the
did.
reality is the initial test showed that it did not. Now, not because of our assumptions were incorrect, but because, as always, when you don't completely drive on the performance, it tends to get worse. And so we mobilized everybody, like the entire company, basically, all the engineers, right? Where we started a series of, I called them Joker card initiatives, right? So several teams during the last push received the Joker card. And what that allows them to do is to cut the red tape. So, for example, the network team had the Joker card. They could request anything from any team and get priority.
That's cool.
And that allowed them to really move forward on their changes and their fixes. And so we started a bunch of those Joker card initiatives on performance specifically. And so every single day we would take captures. We would review hundreds and hundreds of captures, identify code parts that needed fixing, and then literally without a big process, right? So we've cut the process down. You talked about JIRAs earlier, right? This part of the process, no JIRA, right? And we just called out, here's a performance hotspot. And then directors from the company, our amazing tech teams and our engineers just jump on those things and go, I know what to do, optimize, next batch, right? And we kept grinding like this to really make sure that we could deliver above 15 to 20 FPS per server, at least, right, to get started. And we want to go even further, but that was kind of our target, was to deliver something where we're no longer dipping under 10 at all, ever, right? And so,
I rarely seen under 10.
The AI team discovered through this process that there was a very large navigation mesh generation that was directly on the main thread that cost us 15 to 20, sometimes milliseconds, which is the frame budget's 33, right?
I wonder if that was the thing I found.
But the response from the teams were amazing. They rapidly refactored
spawning
and
a ton of
really
AI
key pieces of code to shave on these things.
Marocs and stuff. There was like 1,000 of them in one location.
I'm going to jump into the important ones. Physics is a very big issue for our servers. I've said that before. Not because our physics code is terrible. In fact, it's great. But we demand a lot from it. And we started to look into, well, what's going on here? Why is it costing us so much? And so we really profiled on that side quite a bit together as a team. So one of the things to remember here is that our bugs persist, right?
I don't think anybody's going to forget that
they persist.
Bugs persist.
And so, but what I mean by that in this case is, if I spawn an object, intersecting with this desk, right? In any other game, when the map reloads, these objects are no longer colliding and we're good, right? In Star Citizen, those things will stay in complete
That happened to me
intersection
today.
in the database and in the shard and in its persistence forever, right? And the physics code tries to solve this, right? And that's what's costing us performance in big parts, right? And so we started this Joker card initiative that we call the Physics Expensive Event Resolution. And so it's about the physics engine detecting these things, which it already did, but now raising it for resolution, saying, I need a solve for this. And so a ship that intersects with a wall or that spawn in a wall, a weapon that falls through the
Fight
floor.
for Pyro, my
and
asset
that's
fell
stuck
through the
in
ground.
there, right? Debris has been
I
a big
QT'd
one,
out,
right?
came
And
back.
so
It started at the top.
we needed a way
Fell
to
through the
solve
ground.
this. So what the physics expensive event system does is it raises an event for the game, and the game now receives these objects and it says, debris and player ships. Well, I'm going to do something with the debris. I'll either delete it, stow it, transform it, move it, right?
Is this why we
And so
turned purple and lost our
As we start
stuff?
doing this, it's actually cleaning up all of these intersections across the shard
this
and
was the
basically
purple
giving
event.
us back this performance step by step. And so
They were literally purpling
one of the
us out
very
of the
large
game
things
for
that was very
performance.
egregious in this was actually a bug on the ships where on explosion, some of the components of the ship could stay static in the world throughout the explosion. But, behind the scenes when the ship explodes, we do a whole bunch of things. We replace some meshes with damaged meshes. Some of the elements are physically deformed and move. And we create debris. We literally spawn debris. Now, if those components stay static and we spawn debris, we're creating intersections, debris straight intersection into these components. And so that was a very big part of the problem. We fixed that bug, but we also added a system to basically raise the issues with the debris so that they could be cleaned up automatically. Another one was the AA turrets. So, as you guys play, you destroy these AA turrets at the key locations. Right?
Okay.
And
I'm
there
curious
was a
about
problem
this.
with the setup of these AA turrets that when they died, in the same way as a ship when it dies and the components detach, right? The AA turret had an issue in its setup where it would go like this,
Yeah.
but overlapping each other. Basically, every time someone killed an AA turret, we add it to the server load forever. And so, obviously, now that's being
No way.
evicted completely from the system.
Somebody in chat is like, you can destroy the turrets? Sometimes.
So yeah, they might destroy you first, but
Yeah.
Now
I wanna
they do.
Jump a little ahead here. Just I don't want to get too far in the weeds. Obviously, all this stuff is super important. I've seen some numbers floating around in some various chats about how many bugs and how many fixes were actually resolved over the course of those 4 months. I asked you to look into the numbers. What were the actual numbers?
So for 4.0, between 324.3 and 401, the team have fixed 2,900 bugs in total, but that's over 3,300 tasks.
But that doesn't
so a
mean
bug can require a couple of tasks to
the
fix.
experience
So in general,
that
that's
we're
the,
having
that's
is
the number of
fixed.
fixes overall.
I'm going to ask a very candid question because
for it.
2,900 bugs is a very impressive number. But
Did we fix the right ones?
If the
Did
result
you
is
fix
still
the
happening
right
to the
ones?
player,
It's obviously
matter.
those ones were all. Many of those obviously are important. We have a tremendous coterie of directors, in all studios around the world who are prioritizing these things, and I'm sure they get us, a couple frames here, or they solve an issue that's going to affect those 10 people over there, and stuff like this. But there are many of our long-term bugs, the things that have just been an albatross around our neck for
a
long time. And the second half of this program, we're going to get into those one by one. Right. So I don't want. So without going into each one of those, because we're going to do that in a few minutes here. Why these 2,900 other bugs, and not just 2 or 3 of the ones that would change the lives of hundreds of people, thousands of people?
Well, so
again. Some of these are 100% marked as fixed, but are not fixed
what
as
I can
well.
tell you is that most of those issues are filed, they're called out, right, and they're raised up, but the complexity of some of them require a specific handling. So, if like I've read some stuff over the break where we've hotfixed certain issues. Like there was if I remember, a certain exploit that came out for some duping and some people thought it was a beneficial change, even though it was a bug, and and we fixed it. And people are like, well, why did you fix it when you could fix something else, right? It's all about capacity to fix. So do we have the right person available for this problem? Some problems require the experts. Our manpower is extremely specialized, and for some of the older systems, it's even worse. I call those the sandworm kind of feature, where basically, I've called them out before, but ATC, ASOP terminal, hangars, and transit are 4 of the systems that are always, I'm just going to do a quick change. Never happens. Never a quick change in those systems, right? Yeah. And so...
I want to jump in here.
Yeah.
Uno Mas in Twitch chat is yelling in all capital letters, "You are the experts!"
True.
One of the things that if you watch any of our programs,
why are you even responding to that idiot?
A decade here now. Is that not everybody works on everything.
Sure.
Not everything. Kian is great at this, doesn't know crap about that. Paul is wonderful at this. Would be as lost as I would be tackling this other thing. There are a finite number of experts that are available on any one thing, and like we talked the last time you were here. The folks who made ATC aren't here anymore. So ATC has been one of those features that had rotted, and there was always there's this terrible Sophie's choice, and we have a section about how these choices are made here, where it's like, okay, we can take someone like Kian or someone like Paul or whatever and put them on this, but they're going to be on this for 5 months because they've got to start from scratch.
Right.
Whereas they could fix
he watches my stream
15
still.
or 20 other issues in that same time.
Right.
And you're like, well, and this constant calculus of, is that one worth the weight of those 20s? And it's not a situation I envy you or anybody else. You said you don't make the prioritization. Right. You're in these conversations along with everybody else. Yes. You mean you don't make them alone. You're not the sole person who gets to decide.
Yes.
And so like this, it's like many things are done in a committee because everybody's got their perspective. Everybody's got their priorities. Everybody's got their idea of what they think is the most important.
Why didn't the transit refactor get the Joker card?
Chris will say this is the most important, and Aaron will say this is the most important, and Jens will say this is the most important. And you're like, well, no, this is the most important. And we have the same conversation that the backers have, just 3 weeks earlier is usually what I say.
Because marketing had the ultimate Joker card.
It's prioritization and also having the right resources and having that right resource available, because sometimes the right person for that is also the right person for this, and they've been in this for 3 months.
Right.
And to pull them off of this right now would be devastating to that, because then you get tech debt and that begins to rot. And it's like we sit there.
Oh yeah, there's none of that here.
There are so many times where I've been in meetings or sit in chats and just ground my teeth, because we all know what needs to happen. We all know that thing needs the stuff, but there isn't the resource at the moment to go and do it. And that's at least as frustrating for us as it is for the players, probably more so for the players if I'm being completely honest. But
sure. No, but you're right. It's all about having the right people for the right issues
at the right time.
And
in the
historically,
right place.
If we're being frank, we've been focusing more on the features.
You've been focusing more on the new stuff.
Correct. And I think that what Chris outlined in his letter for the chairman is really the direction we want to go, which is to bring back those experts into helping us fix the things that affect the players day in and day out.
So let's start talking about the letter from the chairman now.
Sure.
So in December, Chris published a letter from the chairman that would set the direction for our entire 2025. I did a big thing at the beginning about this, and when I'm going to ask you for your version of this, I want to read specifically a few words that were from that letter. As we jump into the new year,
hard to tell right now.
Our primary focus across our Star Citizen teams is clear: improving playability. Our drive for playability surrounds 3 critical areas: performance, stability, and content. No
I wonder how that
in there. We understand that the live environment must be far more reliable and consistent, and we are determined to deliver on this. The sentiment many of you have shared, and one we wholeheartedly agree with, is that if the current game, as it stands today, ran smoothly with fewer obstacles and bugs, it would provide an unparalleled experience. Over the years, we've experimented with different approaches to improve quality of life and tackling tech debt.
It would have an unparalleled experience, but it
However,
wouldn't be a game.
the ongoing challenge has been balancing these efforts alongside the introduction of new features and technology. So, in testing new features within the same pipeline as content, it's led to a bunch of intended ripple effects.
What about this from Rich
creating
Tyrer,
instability,
remember?
hindering performance, and impacting overall gameplay. In some cases, new features that are not fully mature have delayed the release of content or caused blockers that impact our progress. This has prompted us to reevaluate our approach to feature and content rollout, focusing on steps that we can take to bring the game to a better state while maintaining steady delivery. And that's the end. That's the last I'll read from this stuff. So
Sure.
It's
I just got
connecting
done at the top of the show
together.
explaining what that means
Mining,
in my words.
salvage,
I
economy,
want to hear what that
kind of
means
stuff.
in your words. What are we actually doing to put those words into effect this year? What are we actually changing?
Stage one is we're committing more resources to fixing issues that affect the live environment, but also that are reported by players. And so in a typical setup, we have to take those resources from features, right? So that means that normally if we're on 50 different features, all these engineers are working on new content to build new components or new features.
Bro,
new
where are the
UIs
1,300
for these
devs?
new gameplay elements. And this can go on for a while because there's prototyping, there's iteration, there's merging, QA, and this can take a while to bring it in. And as Chris is pointing out, it creates ripple effects. And so we have to slow down on the features to get those resources to jump into what I call these Katamari issues. Like we're going to look at a couple later, but issues that require, oh, I need a physics expert. Oh, I need an audio expert. Oh, I need a graphics expert. Oh, I need a gameplay expert. I need a guy who wrote this system. I need a guy who wrote this system. An issue that just keeps growing until it's solved. In order to do that, we need to give a joker card to those issues. And so that's what we're going to do this year, is to slow down on features. We still need to build features, but we're going to pick the ones we can do while still investing in correcting the problems that we know have been in the game either forever or that are newly and very active. And even if they're super complicated to solve and require a refactor, right? So we'll talk about refactors, I'm sure, in the next list.
I hope so.
It also means, what I put in my notes, because we kind of prepared a list so that I can just organize my thoughts, but increasing bug fixing quotas for teams. So in general, teams have not necessarily a quota to fit, but they have an allotted time for bug fixing. We're going to try to jump that by a lot so that we can actually jump on more bug fixes that matter. That's the thing that's key, right? Even though we fixed 3,000 issues, there are maybe 15 or 20 or 30 issues that are really affecting players day in and day out that are bugs or defects that must be resolved.
Or like
so
1,000.
We've put that in a list called the directors list. So every director has a chance to basically flag an issue in their domain and say, I'm going to need a joker card for this issue. And it needs to be solved, right? And so that list is also going to transform itself into a release criteria. So, typically when we do a PTU, we're going through these waves, right? The process at which we go to the next wave is always a bit, it looks good. We look at metrics. We look at, disconnects and stability in general, but we don't necessarily look at quality of the game specifically because we're in development.
Yeah, we fucking
it's always
noticed,
been a bit
dude.
different for us. But I think that we need to change this process for us to move away from being an alpha game. We need to start moving away from the word constant development. In order to do that, we need to professionalize our criteria for launch. And that means that directors list needs to go down. It needs to get the solves that it needs. And those become criteria to move forward.
What's Jared going to say on SCL if it's not an alpha
game? We
game?
cannot fix everything out at the same time. Again, it's a question of resources, but the goal is to make a significant dent in that list, even if it keeps going up there.
You said take or increase the number of engineers and programmers. You're not talking about going out and hiring 100 new people.
No.
You're talking about the people who were
Of course not. You
working
guys
on
have been
base
letting
building, the
people
who
go
were
left and
working on
right.
crafting, the people who were working on resource networks, like that. He's about taking those seniors, those people with the experience, the one that Uno Mas said,
he
the
just said
experts,
it.
about taking those experts and pulling them off the
Taking
new
them
feature
off
development
crafting.
and putting them on the less sexy, stuff like, hey, fix an elevator.
That's an example.
It's
right?
okay. All right. So I want to talk about the 3 areas that were covered in the letters to the channel. We'll
It
start with
has to be
stability.
done. Yeah, it does.
So-
it's going to be rough, but it's got to be done.
I know
It
this is going to
should have
sound like
been
a
done.
simplistic question, and there are probably
Before
lots of
4.0.
Star Citizen. I can see them in the chat right now. JJ Land 614 says no one cares about bug fixing. Is
Get
everybody
that
right?
fucking
Is JJ
guy
Land
out of here.
614 right? Everybody?
Get that fucking guy out of
There's
here.
no reason for me to do that.
Sure.
There was every
So
reason.
lots of
Fuck
people
that
who
guy.
have followed
What
these
an
shows
idiot.
and they know parts of this. I've seen the people in the chat. I already know this because I watch everything. This is a show for everybody.
Right.
What does working on stability really mean? What is it's?
Ban him was the last thing I saw.
We've had a lot of platitudes here, and platitudes are necessary. They're helpful to explain things, but translate this into real world shit for me.
Right.
I use my one swear. What does working on stability
There-
actually translate into as far as action goes?
Well, it translates into aggressively monitoring what we call internally stability. Covers like some of the very simple metrics, like do servers crash, right? Or do hybrids crash? Do clients crash? And together, do these cause client disconnects, right? And so all these metrics go into what we call basically
Yes to
stability,
all.
but it goes further than that. Those are just basically the indicators, like the big level indicators. What stability is like things like bare bone things, like are you able to successfully connect to the game?
Can you log in?
Correct. Can you do successful interactions? Like, can you go to your ship and press F to join your cockpit and then not it take 35 seconds? Is it
For now,
consistent
yes.
and reliable? Meaning, like, is it like this all the time? Or is it there only sometimes, right?
No.
So stability is about consistent and reliable experience interactions. It's also, when we work on stability, we're talking about improving the observability. So teams that, when you guys are playing the game, you have a very immersive experience, and issues that affect you during your gameplay are part of your bubble, right? We need to be able to see those issues from the outside. So from the server side, from the cloud environment side. And so improving observability gives us that, because there are many systems in the game that have not been instrumented to be observed, right? And so sometimes, some older systems, I'm not going to name ATC,
Where's Chris?
are going to have like
This is
some
the guy.
hiccups that we can't even see, but players
Chris is
report
the
to us,
vision.
and then we have to investigate.
This
but
is
we
the guy
need
who makes
more
it happen.
observability.
This is the
that's
guy you wanna hear
working
from.
on stability is part of that. Changing systems that typically are problematics into self-healing systems so that they can just repair themselves. So when they get into a case that we know, we just modify the system to make sure it tends towards a state that's functional. And the observability comes into play to make sure that it does function. Working on stability also means establishing budgets. So budgets for errors, budgets for performance. And so that affects everybody in the company. But if we talk purely on stability, it's all about, is the content that we've produced here or the feature we've produced here using too much resources, whether it's CPU, GPU, server calls, bandwidth, storage, networking. So reinforcing those budgets, going about finding the offenders, right, that go above these budgets and chasing them down, solving them. So that's stability work. Reducing error rates.
He talked about this last SCL.
Obviously, that's part of it. That's the resulting. And the challenge with working stability is that, especially in light of server crashes, is that it's a fog of war. So you can launch a game and you're like a version of the game, and there's one crash that's going around. We can identify dedupe crashes, right? So we know what they are. So we're looking into one, and then we're like, if we fix this one, it's going to be very stable, right? But then when you fix that one, that allows the program to continue. and then more bugs show up, more crashes show up. So it's a fog of war. It needs a constant care and attention. One thing we've done this year to help that is that we have a much more robust hotfix process that frankly we use a bit too much, but it does give us the ability to get some fixes out when we see big problems right away. But it's to contribute to that fog of war. So that's what working on stability for me is. It's all of these issues together.
Do the same thing for performance.
Sure. Performance is it's a larger one. And so performance touches on both the client, the hybrid, and the server. The hybrid is the replicant that takes care of the networking. And so performance is about, obviously, frame rate to begin with on the client and on the server. We talked earlier about server optimizations. It's about loading times. So making sure that the load times are acceptable in all kinds of areas. Like I'm not just talking about the loading screen. I'm talking about loading in assets, streaming in an area, fully initializing a full location, right? That's the load times I'm talking about. Memory utilization, so making sure that we use efficient memory, that we don't go above our memory budgets.
We're getting a little too into the
budgeting, so we need to have way stricter budget. We need to work on that area. And then finally, resource utilization of your machine in general, but also network connections. So latency and bandwidth, connectivity, and
of
stability
what we need to do
in general that need to be improved. So that's what working on performance.
It only
so
matters
stability is one area, performance
they do
is
it.
another one.
All right. So who works on these things? Because this isn't. So we're talking about this major change here. We're taking people off of features and putting them on new features and putting them on existing features, existing work. This isn't something that vehicle artists do. They get to keep doing their thing, but this isn't something that somebody who makes a distribution center for the environment team does. This isn't something that somebody who makes a really unfortunate heart-shaped bed for the subscriber program does.
It was just positioned very weirdly.
Who's the person who's actually who are the people that are actually doing this work? Who's changing to do this stuff?
So it's again engineering, right? That has a large focus on stability and performance, but it's also
the positioning of the bed. It was weird.
We have an online team that takes care of what we call site reliability. So these guys are definitely the first watchers of all these metrics, and these guys will call out issues that we need to solve, right? And then they will loop in
How about putting the vehicle teams on gold standarding then?
Working on this. But
good fucking point.
I kind of want to push back on what you just said about the guys on the ship team don't have to do performance, right? Which I think that sometimes the way things are made in the game have a very big impact on performance, right?
And the old ships, maybe some of the new ones.
I can give examples, but like areas of levels that are created with hundreds of entities, right? Instead of using like a bare minimum, or there's techniques to use where group merging certain objects need to help reduce the actual effective size of things. So the teams on content are also kind of on the hook for performance, less so on stability, but they're on the hook for performance. And so they're not totally free, but they are less in the line of fire, because typically an engineer is needed to identify a problem first, and then it might reach a content team, depending on what the issue is.
Okay.
What's the difference between an engineer and a programmer?
It's basically the same thing, almost.
Why do we use both terms?
I don't know. I think it's when you use programmer when you talk about a coder, and you talk about an engineer when he's got an architectural approach to it, I guess. But they're very similar in my mind.
Sounds like full of shit.
Yeah, a little bit. But
he used to.
You're not going to count that one.
Where's the jar?
You need a drink. You're talking quite a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So let's put things into motion now.
Yeah.
It's 2025. We've got our mandate.
It's February
2025. Set for us by Chris Roberts. We touched a little bit about prioritization and delegating responsibility. So I want to talk about this. It's no secret that anybody who's watched my stuff for years knows that I like to have the conversation that no other game company would ever dream of having. And there's nobody from another game company that would sit here for 2 hours and answer these kinds of questions. So thank you. I want to talk about delegating responsibility. Let me think about how I want to put this. Obviously, we have a lot of talented engineers and programmers across all of our studios. But some are juniors and some are seniors who have all their own specialties and aptitudes. How do we decide who works on what? Because when I look at, if I were sitting on the outside,
that it's like,
and I used to,
we wouldn't need 2
if I
hours.
were sitting on the outside,
if we
I
didn't
would
ask
look
this.
at some of the decisions.
How does
that
this
have been
question
made
help us? I'm
over
not
the
sure.
last couple of years. Elevators have been a plague for forever. A transit system has had a refactor or two in the past and whatnot. Those were all before server meshing.
No, those were Band-Aids,
which will now require.
and they were bullshit, and we know it for sure because the dev who made it told us they were, and he doesn't work there anymore.
Are they thinking from time to time?
Sure.
Why? So I would like you to talk about how this process is done. I know you said that you're not the bare minimum to get it out, but you can speak to this process and how this responsibility is delegated, not just to what bugs get worked on, but who works on this stuff. Talk to me for a bit about that.
Well, so it's an interesting problem, right? Because fundamentally, all these talented programmers and engineers are human beings, right, behind it, and so they
even Paul.
Even Paul, I mean, he does have a beast mode, but he is still a human. And I think that one of the challenges that the teams face regarding this, not necessarily prioritization, let's talk assignment first, right? Okay. Is there's a certain level of ownership, right? If I wrote a system, then I own it, right?
You got to fix it.
Further iterations or bug fixes on this thing, I will be the best qualified to do it because I know the code. Anybody else that needs to go in this code is going to have a,
well, mean for food, right? Roached out. He did,
up, especially at the pace.
He ran out of mana.
I keep saying that in our project.
What do you want him to do?
Typically, we don't release a game before it's in a better state than
most games don't run a live game environment in the middle of their development.
Exactly,
and it's fucking
I call
stupid.
it the cost of shipping, is what hurts us the most because now. Any priority issue for the live patch needs to become absolute, right? But so back to assignment, right? So one programmer writes a system, he owns it, right? So we're going to try to go back to this person when there's bug fixes or items to go to.
They're going to have the least on-ramp time.
Yeah, exactly. But now sometimes it can happen that that's a junior developer. It can happen that it's a senior developer. It really depends, right? Some systems also end up with no owner. When there's churn and people leave and there's replacements or people move on, there's a lot of internal movement at CIG where people want to change their specialty and so you want to keep that distribution fair for the people in there. Like you don't want to assign someone on pure bug fixes for 5 years. Because they're not going to stay with the company, right? You need to balance this out.
That's actually,
in terms of
I think, why the guy left.
How you assign
that was doing the refactor. He's like, I don't want to do transit all day.
Prioritization.
I want to make games. Right? I remember him saying it in the Twitch chat.
Typically, we're going to try to pair juniors with seniors to encourage growth, so that these juniors can become.
This was years ago.
And we can depend even more on them, right? And so that's another constraint that sometimes you need to spend time from a senior on a specific issue to help a junior on another issue.
Sometimes you'll have two people on an issue, not because they can make the baby twice as fast, but because that's how you train that junior to become senior. And that's one less person that could be working on something else.
That's right.
Because this is part of their training, this is their growth. Okay.
Correct. There's also, so we talked junior, seniors, right? We make it simple, but there's also leadership, right? So lead developers, like, I don't know if most people know this, but the lead developer is not necessarily the best developer of the team. Wow. No. But the lead's responsibility is management, right? It's making sure that the issues move and that our plan of action is sound, that it's vetted, that it's code reviews, make sure the quality is there, but also just orchestrating the team, right? So typically a lead should spend roughly 40% of his time.
Why is everybody spamming Elliot's name?
So leadership is also a key element in that. Even if you pair people and you have a million things going together, what is the drumbeat is the leadership, right? And so you need to have all those combinations to be able to have a healthy engineer team. And so you want to avoid overburdening as well. So sometimes you have some developers that come into the company and they're really good, right? But they're juniors, right? So they're learning fast. They have a lot of energy. They're going for it. And so path of least resistance, we're going to go like, oh, well, look, can you look at this? Can you look at this? Can you look at this? And at some point, that person's overburdened. And we have to release our patches so time constraints come in. And so code quality goes down, right? And that's an issue we have to battle every single day.
Now, we had to release our patches with those features in the old system. You're referring back to how we did it before.
No. You have a date when you release the patch.
It's a patch every month,
like
but it's
blatantly
what
obvious.
is ready to go into those patches. We've said some version of this before.
Sure.
And let's just be super honest. We
It's had
haven't
to do
been
with
super
features.
good at sticking to the philosophy. It was after
But you set a date.
it was after 3.0. It was after that really long wait for 3.0, right, where some of us had to grow a really stupid beard.
Yes.
That it was okay, we're no longer going to wait for features anymore. We're going to do this quarterly patch, and then if a feature isn't ready, we're not going to wait for it. It gets pulled out.
They never did that.
We weren't so good.
The famous
at
go no
adhering
go
to-
process.
Yeah, we weren't really good at that.
Which we internally called the go process.
Yes.
Which we moved away from.
I'm very happy to hear you admit that the go no go process was a bit of a joke. It was the go process, and it's because there was this mentality here where we thought that we were
Who
a
had the
feature-driven
mentality?
project. Every people expect X number of features to be in there. We have to make these targets in order
Feels
to
like
keep
they're
people
throwing
engaged and stuff.
Todd
And it was just this
under the bus.
Ouroboros of shit. Oh God, that's 3. Where we were constantly chasing our tail and not getting where we needed to go. Now, that's not to throw the past aside.
they're
We're
doing
super
the same
proud of what
thing.
we've accomplished here.
How
But
is this different?
there's a point where
Shipping narrative
there's a
stuff
point
to try
where
to keep
doing the
us in the
same
game,
thing year after year,
right?
The same way.
the same way. And we always
This
make
isn't-
changes
they're just
here
doing
and
it a
there,
different
and
way.
expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. So this year, and this whole thing that we're talking about today, and we'll talk more about it on ISC next week, is
I think
it's
the
time
ISC
to
is
try
gonna be
something
important.
different. Now, this is incredibly scary for us. I'm gonna go on the record and say we have been a feature-driven project since the PU was first introduced in 2015. We doubled down on that after 3.0 at the end of 2017. To stop that and to turn all of our focus internally, to turn it all inward and to say to this incredibly talented a programmer, you don't get to work on the super sexy hot new feature, you have to work on elevators now. That is going to create problems for us keeping people engaged, keeping people interested and stuff like this. That's when patches come out, and when we get to April or May or whatever, and people are like, where's my new feature? We haven't had a new feature in so many months. That's going to create problems for us on the marketing side and stuff like this. This endeavor is going to
it's
create
true.
struggles for us in how we position the game and how we market the game and how we attract players to come in and play.
This could literally kill
We've
kill
tried
the game.
the other thing for so long, and it's collectively what I'm
Financially.
seeing from everybody, from Chris to Aaron to Rich Tywer to everybody down the line, is something I've never seen in 10 years. Here is this: everybody's hit a point where we've finally reached a consensus that we've done it this way.
Is
enough.
not fixing elevators the
We have to try
sexiest
this
guy
now,
on the
and
planet?
we have to make this experience
Whoever fixes
better.
it?
Famously, we were watching a big streamer jumped into game on Friday, had like 17,000 viewers, and 17,000
He's
people
talking about
viewers
Lyric.
were just watching him fall into an elevator over there, and it was just like we had already made this decision. Like this decision has been in place since December, but we were all just watching, going, "Man, this can't come fast enough." So this is scary, but it has to be done. I want to ask you another question about this assignment and the priority stuff. I
All right,
just
somebody
touched
in
on
chat
it.
just said, I'll
Say
suck
you
a
have
dick for a working
something
elevator. I saw it.
unsexy but super critical.
I didn't see who said it, but I saw it.
and the fix is a long and tedious process. Rewriting the transit system, and it's going to tie someone up for the next 2 or 3 months while they work. Maybe it's longer. Is this something you put on a senior because it's super critical, and then you end up tying that person up for an entire quarter of the year? Or is it something that you stick a junior on because you need that senior doing 3 other things instead? Is this not the ultimate developer Sophie's choice? And is this not what we've struggled with for a decade, at least the time I've been here?
As an outsider,
how are we fixing this?
I don't understand.
Well, so previously the answer would have been junior with some support, right? That's what we would have done before. It would have been, no, we can't compromise the feature. You know, this work is important. It's going to be transformational for the PU. This fix or this rewrite, you know, we're going to give a support network around someone that's in the team that's not necessarily one of our superstars, you know. And I mean, I want a team where everybody can grow into a superstar, you know, but sometimes, you know, you have to be in the middle, right? And so the previous setup would have been something like this, right? Where we would give a support network, but the person in charge would have been, you know, not necessarily like the leads and the people that really push the needle, because those would be on transformational features for the PU. The answer this year will be no. We're using
working PU would be transformational
players to come and solve these problems for us, because they have to be solved, right? Like we keep talking about transit. It's not, you know, transit has touched 1 million people at CIG, and we've tried to, you know, keep it running for a while, but now it's time to put, you know, a real effort behind it, right? Which is to basically take resources from the transformational elements and go and fix the foundation.
So we've now called ourselves out on our own BS, and we're now putting everybody where they need to be. How do you decide whether that old feature is fixable or whether it's so far gone that it needs a refactor?
Sure. Well, so that's a good question, right? Because sometimes the worst cases like this is when a system or an issue is like almost fixed, right? Where like a developer comes in and is like, oh, I have a fix for this, right? But what we need to do now is also look at these features to answer that question, which is the way the feature or the system was constructed compatible with what the PU is going to be, or what the technology behind the PU will be, which is
to be
a combination of the streaming technology that we've built before that has been a very complicated and complex system, even on its own, without server meshing, and then the systems under streaming and server meshing together. And so there are systems in the game that are not adapted to that approach, right? And so when we look at one of the key problems that we see in the game, we're going to look at the underlying system, and if we need to rewrite, it'll be because, like it needs to be rewritten to take advantage of streaming and server meshing properly, right? Versus trying to patch and kind of cobble it together, right, to make it work. So that's how we make the decision, is really we're going to have to look deep in all these things to decide which ones need. We've already done some of it, like we're calling out some stuff already.
Yeah, I literally saw a meeting earlier today where you're literally presenting every single engineer in the company, and it's like, okay, it's like, and it was a collective effort. It was okay, so it's where do we put this person? Where do we put this person? I've never seen in the time that I've been here such a granular kind of overarching, okay, no, we need to reevaluate everything. All prior assumptions are done. Yeah. Let's look at the entire field of players we have.
Their audio just went out of sync.
Who's supposed to go where best? And stop everything, fresh start. That leads me to my next question here. So we're a company of near or over 1,000 people. I can't keep track across the studios in the world, but there's still a limited number of these engineers and programmers.
Should I refresh? This is kind of like a
delegating them between these tasks.
Goofy question.
Yeah.
But you've also got this thing called Squadron 42.
That's right.
Over here. And in October, we flashed up a big
really bad,
2026.
Change res? Okay.
I was there when I saw way back when. And
that fixed it. Thanks.
Chad Zack spoke for all of us with like, what? So we stayed away from pointing out a year for so long because we grossly underestimated in last time. But now we've done this. So you've got this
Goalpost.
I was going to say hangman's noose, but goalpost is much more positive sitting here.
Yeah.
That's got to get done too.
Yeah.
So what is this split like? Is this just an even 50-50 split? This many of them are on Star Citizen, this many of them are on Squadron 42. Is it 60-40? Is it hard? Is it flexible? Are there Joker cards that bounce between the projects? Does Chris have a veto every 3 months where he gets to rearrange the people? How does this split work?
So that's an interesting question because it is, we are making 2 games. There's some good news, right? Because a lot of the gameplay systems that power the actor, and that power the core of the game are the same between the 2 games. And so improvements on one end result in improvements on the other one, plus or minus the online versions of these features, right? In the let's say we take one team, right, which is the most important in this one, like the gameplay teams, right? That's where we have to be more fine-grained, right? There's this thing that we have to be careful about, which is context switching, right? Obviously, building a single-player cinematic game and building a multiplayer MMO-like game are similar, but the context switching between the 2 projects costs time, right? So you want to find a scheme where you have the resources on what you're trying to achieve at each milestone. Like Squadron 42 has its internal milestone and its cadence that it needs to respect this year, which is extremely aggressive, in order to get a game completely complete by the end of the year and ready for 26 release. And so there are resources that are, more suited to the type of things that Squadron 42 kind of needs right now in its polish phase and its finalization phase for all the levels and all the chapters. And so obviously these people will be favored to work on Squadron 42. So there's a series of people that are on there. I don't have an exact percentage,
so
but it's not 50-50.
2023, the communication
there are
it
also
wasn't
things
like
that are
this.
built on the PU that are beneficial on that side. And so the thing that if Jens was here with me, he would say the thing we need is flex, right? And so flex is when we need reinforcements, we can get them, right? And so we have a model now where
if people know
there
Ian,
are a series of engineers that will work, dedicated to Squadron, but we can flex on both sides depending,
He
right,
comes
on the
to
milestones.
us
And the 2 projects
often.
have now a cadence that's adjacent, and so we kind of know at every milestone what Star Citizen needs and what Squadron needs, and so we can flex accordingly. And these features are kind of a lot of those features are similar in both ends, and some of the bug fixes that we need on SC are also needed, right, on both sides, especially actor-related bugs. And so it's a tricky balance, right?
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense. And I was in that meeting where Chris and Jens were talking about the need for flex and stuff, and I agree. It's my first show in 2 months. Maybe it'll be my last one. There's a phrase that comes to my head when I'm listening to you. Says it's this jack of all trades and master of none thing. Now, that's not precisely analogous to this, but if people are bouncing, how does any one thing get done? That's the first question I have there, and I know there's no easy answer to this, but you agreed to come on the show and you agreed to take the uneasy question, so I'm taking advantage of our decade-long relationship and putting you on the spot here. It's absolutely important if this thing in Squadron has to be done because it will unblock 50 other people. So we'll take those 2 people from Star Citizen for 2 weeks and get it done. And that's a worthwhile use of flex. Sure. And I understand why that exists and why that's important. But how do you keep that from becoming just this and
you probably don't.
Amorphous,
and
2
all of
amorphous
this is
blobs
on
that never
paper.
get
Hopefully it'll work. Stuff right now.
The key is in the specialization, right? So we have teams like, I can give an example, like the mission system team, for example, are highly specialized in the online mission system, right? And so...
Oh, and Elliot Maltby, don't leave him out.
And Elliot, right? The Kid Rock of missions. But this assignment, right? You take the resources that are good at one element that one project needs, and you can dedicate it. Then you're not losing anything from the other side, right? The flex obviously is there in your extra kind of chunk of resources, right? Every team has like core members and extra members that can flex, and so the idea with this has been to make a plan where we can actually focus on the things that matter, and we pick what we think matters.
Hasn't the problem everything has always mattered? So
on the SC
tough.
side helps us, like for the bug fixes that we're going to be looking at.
So much still to do. Everything matters.
We know what those are, so we make sure those are covered. So it's about not just prioritization and assignment and just blatantly going SC, Squadron, It's really about looking at what do we want to achieve? And on SC, we want to achieve a better playability.
Okay,
and so we're going to
that's all that matters.
Resources to that. The flex will come only when we ship, right? That's the moment where flex actually happens. So end of milestones. And so the impact at this will kind of be minimal because we minimize the context switch on the key resources. Like leadership is a key part of this. The right leads in the right places make a big difference.
Okay.
Those ones need to not move. That's the
it makes sense. It's not a question with an easy. It's not a question with an easy answer, and it's not a question.
I don't think it's possible to answer because it probably depends on every situation.
Probably ask their execs live on the internet, but like I said, we're
going for it.
We're going for it.
Marketing show.
I want to talk about one more topic before we get to a topic that I've listed in my notes as persistent buggyverse.
Right.
And that's Alpha 401. So last week was just last week, right? We released Alpha 401.
Tuesday. Still don't know why outside of
I saw people
marketing.
online. People that, if I'm being as frank with those people as I am with you, probably should have. Some people expected the silver bullet patch. Like there was a letter in December, and they thought in January there would be a silver bullet where everything was fixed.
No, some people maybe.
I personally find that expectation a bit silly. On the flip side of that, though, these are people who have been waiting.
Yeah.
They've been waiting a long time for us to figure this out.
Yeah.
For us to have for us to
I can only speak for myself.
To come in from the cold and realize that
as fixed.
So many years of doing it this way, it's time to switch to do it this way.
Three of them were not fixed.
I understand the frustration and everything is justified.
And then it just goes live, and those fixes are marked as
fixed. It was
fixed.
not a silver bullet patch.
Sure.
This 402, it might even go to PTU today or tomorrow. We're here, so I can't see the chats that they're trying to put on PTU. For the end of this month, will not be the next silver bullet either.
Right.
As I said at the beginning of the show, this will
Hopefully
be a thing.
It's a gradual improvement.
Month after month.
Yeah.
We patch without new features, but just new content built on existing features and bug fixes, and slowly we start changing the temperature of the water, of our persistent universe.
It's that it came with a ship sale and it came with an event.
Anyway, but
I'm sure I was going somewhere.
Is where people are like, this looks weird. But now that we know that they want to ship content with these monthly patches.
When can we start?
I think that's the part that they didn't communicate very well to us.
So I see what I read.
It makes
and
more
what I read
sense
is,
after
what I wrote
SCL.
for myself is dumb. I don't want to
go
ask
off
that
to me.
question.
If that's what they want to do, the Tuesday 4.0 patch makes
did not
more
solve
sense.
all the problems.
No.
Is it a legitimate improvement over 4.0?
In many areas, it's a drastic change. Yes.
In what way? What are those areas?
Especially for the issues that affected a lot of players during the break. If you played during the break on 4.0 preview, like a lot of
I got
very
shardlocked twice
dramatic problems have been solved in 4.01 or hotfix, right? Because the 4.01 also includes all the hotfix from 4.0. So it is fundamentally,
not permanently,
a better patch, but it regressed in key areas that are very problematic.
Yes, I'm looking at a chat right now.
Very
drastic.
Yeah.
with
Yes.
with a lot of emojis.
From the observability standpoint, right? Not from the. I think that in terms of the forward-facing elements of the patch, we have regressed in 401, but from the infrastructure
I like to hear
level,
that honesty.
we have actually made a step forward, and so it's a 50-50 one.
It's a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing.
I would say so. Yeah.
And the 1 step back just happens to be the part that the players see.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I know there's
Yeah.
we're about to jump into this.
Xylo, it's just
The Buggyverse.
I can't pause.
I'm on the verge of something here, and I'm trying to figure out what it is in my head.
What you're saying is fair. I'll just leave it at that. But there's got to be a better way. You hard committed they were fixed.
I guess what I really want to ask is
you're marketing 100
it wasn't going to be. It's not going to be in one patch. It was never going to be in one patch. Any expectations that it would be in one patch or 2 patch, frankly, a bit silly. But we're all.
Yes,
when I say
the
we're all,
verbiage
I mean
is
not just the
helping
people
a
who play
lot.
the game. I mean the people who make the game too. We're all frustrated.
Yeah.
We're all tired. We're all exhausted of logging in and seeing people stuck at one in position and seeing elevators not showing up and people falling through trams and stuff like this. It's not going to be one patch and it's not going to be 2 patches. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5.
Man,
maybe
I
it's
wish
7.
they were this tired 2 years ago.
I guess the question I really want to ask you before we move into the Jira section here is this plan going to work?
I think so. But what it needs, right, is, and I think Chris's letter kind of sets the commitment. That's what we needed, right?
No, I know, Xylo,
going
about marketing
from the
wise.
previous way of making the game to this new way, like a company of our size takes time to shift gears and change direction. And so even though you're like, okay, guys, this is our focus now, reorder priorities, assignments, it takes a while before it actually takes form, right? And you need the people in the teams to really grasp what we're after, right? In terms of increased playability, what it means for them in the day-to-day, right? And I think that we have the commitment from the leadership to change this, and we have the means to do it. So in order to support this effort, right, it's not just we're talking about priorities and orders, and that's one part of the puzzle. But what the other part of the puzzle is to make sure these teams are properly supported to do this, right?
I do think this goes all the way back to Summit and Shroud a long time ago, yeah.
That's been plaguing the project for a long time, that we've been kind of dealing with, putting in the corner, right? Tackling some of it, but then, letting it build up. And I think
snowball
that
that could have had
head on. And to support our teams, it's about helping them improve the output through better process, better pre-submission checks, better validation, building the tools that will allow them to have confidence that when they put a fix, that it's fixed, or that when we say a bug is fixed, that it is fixed, which is, let's just say that it's been an issue, right?
No.
Yes.
Yes. No. Many have been the times where I've seen.
I'm going to turn off
everybody
alerts.
From you to Chris to Yang in the chat saying, they read a report on Reddit or they see something on Twitch or YouTube and they find the Jira and the Jira says it's fixed.
Yeah.
And it's like, I thought this says it was fixed. And that happens for a lot of reasons. We've talked a lot about how there are multiple causes for the same outcome. And they
might fix
cause
this.
of that outcome was fixed, but now we've just exposed a second different cause for the same outcome. It's frustrating. We're doing a lot of the problem is Jira. Somebody in the chat. We're doing a lot of talk here. And we still got some more talk to
and every year,
the proof will ultimately be
in the action.
I keep saying,
in the action.
Correct.
In the
it's
month
about the
after
action.
Month,
And it's
patch
year
after
after
patch. There won't
year
be a
with
patch
no
every single month.
or
Like I
not
said,
enough
we're
action.
currently looking at about 9 or 10 on the schedule. We actually have a meeting tomorrow where we're going to kind of hammer that down and have a better idea. Certain things affect the patch cadence, but but more patches this year than any year prior, but with less of the feature work,
But
far
they're
less of the
insignificant.
feature work, and more of the content and the bug
In terms of
fixes.
features.
The content that doesn't require new features. Like somebody in the chat was just saying, do less events. It's not the events that are problems, it's the events that are built on new features. Like I was about events built on existing feature work and stuff.
All
consume time.
events
That's
are
part of
built
what we're
on the
looking at.
mission
That's like this.
refactor, which is new.
The
What
proof
is so
going to be
difficult about that part, though?
the proof. It's gonna take.
Well,
it's gonna take this
We
year.
don't have the
ultimately
old
it's just the
missions
product,
yet.
right? That's the thing that counts. Is what's the output, right? Does the output get better? Are we still dealing with
No,
the
I
same
don't think
problems
events
that
equal
we've seen
sales.
before? Did we actually
This event
solve
isn't
any of those
selling
issues?
anything to anybody,
Or are we
let's be
still
honest.
going to look at, interrupted missions?
That's the only
or,
part I don't
any of these
understand.
bugs that are plaguing us, right?
It's built on the mission
And
refactor,
I think
which isn't
that's
done.
the key, right? And that's how we should be measured. It's in, does this new method work? Is the product improving, right? And in its quality.
Yeah. Kid Casper, first-time chatter, says, did a dev ever play Siege of Orison? Yeah, Siege of Orison is a great example of an event that took substantial feature work. And the feature work that was underneath it was the stuff that was not.
And now they don't
ready for
run
prime
it.
time. It's not exclusively the idea of an event that's bad. It's how you build the event, whether you build the event on current existing proven technologies or whether you try to do something crazy. And we're still going to try to, let's be real. I've been here for too long.
Yeah, are you going to do base
to
building
sit
and
here in front of
crafting
everyone and say,
and
we're going to
engineering
stop
this year?
trying things new? That's not who we are. We're going to dramatically reduce the risk. We're going to dramatically reduce
I'm just
how
curious.
far out over the edge with new things that we do. There are going to be moments this year where we still try something new here and there. And hopefully it works better than
We
than
might
in the
just see
past
them in the
because of
tech
our new tech
previews.
preview situation because of the new methodology. There may be one or two moments this year where we try something new and it still bites us in the butt. That's just, I've been here too long to even remotely hint at saying otherwise. But on the whole, what I've seen from people at every level this year is something I've not seen in the 10 years I've been here, and that is this collective realization that we have to change and stuff. So I'm more hopeful for this year than I've been for other years. It's not going to be a year full of a bunch of exciting new features. It's going to be a dramatically different year with different content and stuff. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. It's scary because we've never.
No, yeah, it's completely different for the project.
I think they
for
should
sure.
be scared.
All right.
It really could affect them negatively financially.
Persistent buggyverse.
Yeah.
So,
They might lose whatever momentum they
sorry.
have.
So it's not all going to be fixed in one or two or even
but
three
it still
patches.
feels like the right thing to do.
But if I'm allowed, I think I can speak for everybody in the community when I say what the F about some of these long-term issues. So these long-term existing issues that have plagued the game since 3.24 or longer. So I got together with folks from the community team, Tyler and Lenny and Freya and all those folks. I got together with people from the player relation team, Bayer and his folks and everything. And I even got a few of these from Chris Roberts himself.
There you go.
I got a list of issues that I want to ask you about and get some status updates on.
Sure.
Okay.
This is basically the part of the show where I hold your
Where we dive in.
butt to the fire.
Sure.
You ready?
Yeah.
So in no particular order. No,
Hang on.
there is an order.
Hang on, before we start, right? So I'll be the messenger here. So we did a little prep, right? We looked at a couple of these because I needed to prep. Unfortunately, I don't know everything.
You don't know the current status of every single major bug in the game, Benoit?
No, I do not. I wish
Get
I
out.
did. I mean, that'd be great. But I
Some
did
of-
do the
some of the
scavenging
chatters
to
do.
make sure that we got at least an update on most of those. And so
Okay.
that's, we'll get out of it.
All right.
Go for it.
I want to start with server and shard instability.
Yeah.
Now I'm just going to read my notes here. We've got frequent login issues, including being stuck at position 1 in the queue for extended periods, shard locks, the servers becoming unresponsive or dead with players extensively discussing strategies for finding working servers, often relying on joining friends' instances. So let's tackle these one by one.
Yep.
Login issues and being stuck at position 1.
So this one we're actually deeply investigating right now. It looks like, so we have, and I'll go deep with technical details here to properly explain, not just the status report. So matchmaking, right? So when you click on that button, join the universe, you're talking to the matchmaking service or the matchmaking system. he will find one of the shard instances that's available, right? All these shards report their health to make sure that they're, doing good, that if one of their servers is not good or their FPS is not in a good condition, it always reports a score.
This is why
and we
you
will
end up on a
always try
server
to
with
match
50
you to
people
either
and nobody
something that
joins
has
it.
shard affinity to you, or
shard affinity.
well, it's either your player is already in that shard, right? That's the ultimate affinity, or you've been in that shard before. So we try to have a level of shard affinity. Now the problem with stuck position 1 is that we've matchmade you on a shard. And now the matchmaking service is basically telling the shard, this guy's coming. That's called a process called authorization. And for some reason, now the latest
The
update
shard
that
says,
I've got
"Do
this
not
morning
come."
is that the authorization call sometimes will take multiple minutes to close out. And so we don't know what the cause is on this one yet. It's kind of a new identified condition, but that's one that we need to hotfix absolutely on live in order to get that back in there.
So that's one that, when we figure it out, is fixable by hotfix. Some things require a patch, some things require a hotfix that can be done under. So that's a thing that can be fixed
Hotfix.
any day of
Now,
the.
I can speak a bit about the hotfix, how it works, right? Now, I don't like to use the word hotfix for everything, but that's the word we have for now, right? Because not all fixes are necessarily hotfixes. Some of them are just, they need to go out. But so what we cannot fix right now is a server change. So a change that goes on the game servers. That's one of the easiest things to roll out. So we can actually make a code change.
That's why they're doing them every day, probably.
Your game servers will slowly start updating, right? And that is the easiest one to roll out. But there's some requirements for this. There must be no data change, no asset change, and the network compatibility of the build needs to be maintained. And so that means that there are some things we cannot hotfix because it would cause a client incompatibility.
Which is why we get .1s and .2s and .3s.
We can't roll it out, right?
We have to wait for the next patch window.
Well, yeah, exactly, right? Which we are talking about in interest of this to have now like maintenance windows where we can actually roll out data fixes, right? Where we now need to force players to upgrade their client, but that would allow us to actually, take the environment down, also do some maintenance. We rarely do live maintenance on the environment just to, change things. We kind of try to keep them the way they are, but this will allow us to actually
I asked someone about this.
Live changes more
We'll see if he answers it. If he doesn't,
so we're trying
I'll
to
say what
nail
they
the
said.
process now for that. And so the second kind of thing we can change is a hybrid fix. Now those are very hard to do because a hybrid restart will disconnect all players on a shard, and so we can't upgrade a shard that's already running, and so we have much fewer game shards now than before, and so that means that disrupting them will have a drastic effect on the live environment, and so those fixes are a bit of a problem. So typically, it reflects in the number and the name of your shard when the hotfixes roll out.
Chat is just spamming. Do it! Just do it! One of the things that we don't do that a lot of MMOs do is have that regular Tuesday downtime or something like that. And those are the times where those things are necessary for other games. Is this something we've considered?
Yes, that's what we're trying to prepare for now, is to have an official maintenance window that we're not thinking about systematically doing a downtime, but we're thinking about scheduling it, and then we'll let players know before that happens.
Okay.
And then we'll be using those moments to do infrastructure changes or upgrades that normally we would have to wait for.
Cool.
Hopefully
it's not while I'm streaming.
I'm just looking at chat right now. There's nothing you've said in the last hour and a half that's getting the reaction. They're just like, yes, give us a maintenance window.
Yeah, look.
4!
No, that's 5.
Is that 5?
I think so.
5?
The reason it was explained to me that they didn't do this
load times went way up.
Is
Yeah.
Star
In
Citizen's
4.0.
persistency.
Yes.
Way up.
That's
Then
right.
walk.
All the
Yeah.
things would still be there. It doesn't delete those things.
Especially for Pyro.
Pyro side.
And frequently players would actually time out of their
So
load.
doing these downtimes wouldn't be as
So,
beneficial as you think.
Interestingly,
And they wouldn't fix as many things as they
that's
do
still
in
being
other
investigated,
games.
But the current hypothesis on this is that the way the Pyro system was built, First of all, the requirement when you connect, right? What the hell is the game doing, right, in that loading screen? And then you open the console and there's stuff flying around. What is it doing, right? It's going through this context establisher set of tasks, which are like all the phases for the connection, right? Currently, when players load into Pyro and have a long load time, it seems to be related to the way the system was built, where there's an entity in the Pyro system that holds the spacescape for the system, right? Now, we're peeking behind the curtains of how the levels are made, but there's a requirement for the CET connection, right, that requires that all the entities that the client needs to load need to have an authority assigned, right? Now, so this is directly a server mesh change. And so if an entity that you're loading doesn't have an authority yet, which could be any server in the mesh, right? If one of them doesn't have an authority yet, then the load time will have to wait for this entity to gain an authority. Now, how can this entity not have an authority? So our current hypothesis is that if the server that is hosting that Pyro Spacescape entity, which has a giant radius, so every client loading into Pyro needs that entity. If the server that hosts that entity is currently rebooting because it has a crash on it, then all players will have to wait for that server to do the full provisioning loop, boot up, acquire, load the data, acquire the entity, and then players will load in. For some players, that overrides that busts the time it needs for the timeout for the login. So that's our current lead, and we think we have a fix, but we're obviously that's another one that we would roll
not 100%.
out. I think it's a code fix on the hybrids that we can actually roll out for that.
While you were giving that answer, Chris Roberts just messaged and says, "Benoit, are we having login issues again?" and Guillaume is like, "I'm poking Ahmed because Benoit's on SCL talking about this right now." So, get off Benoit's back, Chris. Delete. Do not hit enter. No, okay. So I know I see people who are stuck in this thing who are waiting. Like, they shut their client down and they log back in. They shut their client down. Like, is that helping their case or is that hurting?
No,
their
it's
case?
just probably hurting.
So I have a lot to say about that.
Okay. Anytime I've sat and wait patiently, it's worked out for me. And people say they can't log in. I just sit here
everybody kind
patiently.
of has a recipe for fixing login issues, right? A lot of them involve disconnection, shard hopping, loading into AC, rebooting twice.
He's going to say it's all bullshit.
Printing a document. I don't know, right? That is actually one of the things that we've identified as missing in our testing process. So we do some load testing before we launch a patch. And so we test with clients logging in and logging out, and everything's great. What we're not testing is launch client, persistent universe, Alt F4. Launch client, persistent universe, AC, right, Alt F4. Client, persistent universe. And so a lot of the issues that we've seen in the 4.0 release, when we put in the persist hanger flow, for example, that allows you to log into your hanger, the system for this needs to move your player, we call it unstow your player into the shard. It also needs to unstow your hanger. Now, when players are constantly logging in and out of shards, now you've got multiple shards doing this process for you, and they need to complete that process. We've identified a ton of concurrency issues with this in 4.0, elements that we didn't test for because you test the load, not the repeated concurrency. And so that's one thing we've identified that we absolutely need to add to our testing process, because it's one of the other things. I've talked about this before. The difference between PTU and live is like a 20x increase. Yeah. That's also one big difference, is that on PTU players don't shard hop that much.
One of the forever things that if there's a double-edged sword of PTU, and there are many,
yes,
but this is like the one that's always amused me. people are more patient on PTU than they are on live because they recognize that they're helping us, they're helping the development of the game, they're doing a job, and that
the people who are on
patience
PTU
is
are more
necessary
patient
and wonderful. Yeah. But it doesn't make for an effective test of live, and it's yet another reason we have to go to these live environments sometimes, and we don't discover these things till live environments, because live is where Hyde comes out.
Right.
You know, so many people in PTU are Dr. Jekyll, and they're all nice and knowledgeable and restricted, and then live environment is where it's interesting. It's all right.
Well, that's one of the key differences, right? And so a lot of the issues that, are plaguing us right this second, right, are still remnants of that we are tracing a lot of them. I spent a lot of time on Spectrum during the break, during the
I think if the PTU wasn't so bad,
workation, actually digging into a lot of those,
do this
to be
initiative,
able to make sure that when the team would come back, that
things would be different.
Some traction on some of those.
Last question on servers, because then we're going to get to the character stowing and repair here.
Yeah.
What are shard locks, and why do servers become unresponsive?
Well, so that second part's why.
Little question here.
All right. So shard lock, we never really call this shard lock. This is like a community term. You're never really locked into a shard, but your character can only be into one. And so if you get match made into one of, let's say, US E1B 010, everybody's favorite shard, which it is true, that shard is cursed. It's right now, it's always 010. I don't know why. But that one is always the one.
It's always cursed.
Take it out to the shed and shoot it.
It doesn't matter.
Seriously.
It doesn't matter which patch the USE 010 shard
don't
for some
have
reason is the bane.
Start
of
at
our
a different
existence.
number.
Anyway, so you go play there. Your character will get unstowed. So Hybrid will unstow your character, moves it from the global database that allows you to go anywhere to that shard. Now you are, according to the community, shard locked, right? Because you're playing in that shard right now. What's supposed to happen is that if you quit the client or you get disconnected or the client crashes, when you come back, you're going to match made on this shard again, right? Now, if that shard is no longer available during the time where you decided to come back or whatever, then that's going to give you a nice little 60K error, right? Which will say, hey, your character is there. That shard is no longer available. Now, what that means is that behind the scenes, there's a process that's taking if the shard is crashed, there's a process that's currently processing that shard and will stow back your character. So it's time. Time will fix it, right, in this case. During the 4.0 preview, some players got into a state where the character could not get stowed back. That was a back-end a bug that prevented that from happening. And so their character was kind of seemingly corrupted.
Today,
and so
I had
we
it
had to
happen
go
twice,
in and fix
and
a lot
time
of those.
fixed
That
it.
caused a permanent 60,030, I think is the one. Where basically some players were stuck in that mode for a long time, and so we had to actually do manual actions to solve that. But otherwise, in most of the time will make your character go back to the stow position, and then once you're stowed back, you're able to go back in there. So that's what we call, or I think that's what the community calls shard locking.
Yeah, it was definitely the 630. It's building a reputation. It's
There's
coming for 30K's
15
crown
Yeah,
right now.
slowly.
Let's talk about elevators and trams.
Oh,
Talk about
God.
elevators and trams.
We didn't talk about repair. You don't want to talk about repair?
Well, actually, that question was mostly about the 60-30 and
Okay.
the stowing. You basically covered all that stuff.
That's kind of true.
So,
Well, repair doesn't fix
elevators
it,
and
right?
trams.
Yeah.
Broken or missing elevators in various locations, preventing access to hangars and other areas, or simply trapping players inside. Trams that either let you fall through the floor or yeet you into lower orbit. My question to you,
What the fuck? That's 6. So, brief history, right, of transit. This is
Will
a
mean
very
for
old
food.
system that's been in the game for a long time. And transit in the context of streaming is already a non-trivial problem to solve, because and I need to dive into the why, so to explain a bit, the complexities behind it. But So the transit system is composed of multiple components, right? You've got peripherals, so that's, for example, the button you press to call an elevator or a tram. It's the indicators that say, hey, the tram's coming in, this amount of time. Those are peripherals. You have gateways, which are locations where a carriage can stop at. So, for example, if you're in Lowerville, and you go to the train, where the train stops, it's like a station. That's called a gateway. You have carriages, which are either elevators, trains, trams, all these things that move along a path. And then they go from gateway to gateway. And they respond to orders that are submitted from peripherals. All sounds nice and dandy. What's the problem, right? So in any game, any other game that doesn't have full-on level streaming, all of these things are always loaded. So the manager, the piece of code that actually is managing the fulfilling the orders and moving the carriages in general, or has the logic of the carriages, is always, all this network is streamed in. It's all loaded, so it's always available. It knows where the carriages are, it knows what's happening, everything is there. In our environment, because of our SOCS technology, that allows us to have more performance on the servers because we unload the rest of the zone. That means we unload those carriages. So think about your Lowerville train that you see stop at you and then leave. On the server, if nobody's on the track, it doesn't have a carriage there. It's unloaded, right? And so the current iteration of the system actually destroys that carriage and will recreate carriages when it needs it, right? And there's been
Is that where the elevators are going?
So that's the first part, right? Is the streaming part. That makes it a bit more complicated. The second part is that the way the system was built initially, it would fulfill these orders to those send orders. Basically, you call the elevator from your hangar. I need to send a lift there. So the system is going to tell the lift to move. The lift moves on its own, right? So you will jump and then do the actual path. We want those to be physicalized, so they're actually following certain paths. Now, the issue is that combined streaming with these orders and state is lost in certain conditions. And so the system just needs a whole lot of changes on its communication layer to be reliable, and it needs a fundamental change in how it fulfills these orders. Instead of just sending a message to a carriage and hoping for the best, the transit manager needs to be actually always tending towards the state that it should be in so that it can self-heal for any kind of issues, right? Whether creating the carriage failed or streaming out and losing a piece of it, the system needs to change to be able to properly do that. So that's what the new system that we're writing is going to do. It's going to solve these communication issues with streaming, and it will make the system self-heal. But we also need to do fixes to the current system immediately, right, to get that working. So now we do have a crack team on this right now, where we've significantly increased the size of the group that is looking at the current elevators issues, which we have absolutely regressed on. And they're looking at adding the self-healing component I just talked about directly in the system. So I was happy to hear that we have now proper reproductions for at least a couple of cases where the gateways are basically becoming defunct. And so you call the elevator and it never shows up, right? That's the number one case that we see at the moment. Or the other one is a lift shows up, you press a button and it doesn't move, right? So that's when the transit manager's lost this carriage, or the gateway is no longer usable. And so now we have those reproductions.
Okay.
And they're not just happening at to players. Now we have an actual case where we're able to actually go down and we've seen what actually is going on. So we can put the self-healing things I just talked about to fix it.
So in the past, when we've talked about some of these issues and why they haven't been fixed or whatever, it's because we've had this aversion to doing double work.
Yeah.
We don't want to work on a Band-Aid when we know the long-term solution is ripping the whole damn thing out.
Yeah, you fucking Band-Aided it.
Try to do minimal
every
change
patch
on the existing and
for
what
5
you just
years.
described, though, is doing both. Though. So at present, I just want to confirm this here. At present, some amount of persons are working on writing a brand new transit system built for
No, they're
built for
talking
the
about
server meshing
part of the
reality.
brand new system being put in
and all
right
this
now.
stuff.
Is that not what he
And-
said?
But at the same, that's going to take X number of months to do. Not wanting to wait for that because
We need to fix.
you need to fix now.
Right.
There's also another group of people focused on a short-term self-healing fix to the current system,
Which was
that
part of the new
may not
system.
fix everything, but will dramatically improve it. Is our hope.
Yes. Well, we want it to function the way it should function, which is all the time, like reliable, right? Now, it might mean because we are still going to have the issue of the streaming out and some error handling, that it might take longer for a lift to arrive in certain cases, but it will arrive. And it will
Because it'll have that error checking, it'll have that self-healing. So
That's fine.
the idea is that
Nobody
it won't
cares
just
about that.
not show up.
Right.
It won't
In the
just-
short term, no one
you
would
won't
care
just fall
about
through
that.
It. It'll just you may wait twice as much as you were
unless
used
it's
to.
in
like
those cases.
But
5
then
minutes.
it will show up.
Correct.
Well, that would be something. At least,
It would
at
be
least for the short term.
Yes.
That would be something.
Okay.
And that helps me explain why
I'm
we're
okay
doing
with that.
both.
Right. No,
But
because we
why
need to
we're
fix
doing
it
short-term
right now.
fixes and
Exactly.
long-term.
But I
Okay,
don't
that
think
makes
this is
more
a
sense to me.
Band-Aid fix. It's part of the
Somebody
new.
asked, do the elevators in Squadron 42 work?
They use the same system, but the streaming bubbles in Squadron 42 are a lot higher, so they will stay streamed in.
Single player, yeah. And then many people are like, just build stairs. Like, who knows? Maybe
You
maybe we
can't
can
build
convince
stairs
Next will be all stairs.
from.
Or ladders, maybe.
Like, do you know how far the actual distance is? Like, go look at what you call your ship for your hangar.
Hangers.
Look at how far the
All
ship
right.
is from you. You want to walk down that many
Failing
fucking
to spawn
stairs?
ships correctly. Platforms getting stuck. Ships being destroyed while they're stored.
Yeah.
I saw that one. I'm like, what? Like, or hangars being assigned incorrectly. One by
They're all
where do you want to start?
trash.
I gotta
Doesn't
come
matter.
clean first. On the ships being destroyed when stowed, that was 100% me. So
Caught.
we were looking at some.
Hold on, look right in the camera.
Yes.
It was you, Benoit.
Yes. So that was a back-end change that we did to try to alleviate some of the load that we were seeing on some areas. And one of those side effects that was unplanned was that the location ID of ships weren't being updated when they changed. And so the way the ASOP terminal, again, moving sands, right, does its reconciliation, which shows you what's available for you, it actually uses the location as the key element to know if a ship is actually, available. Not only is it stowed, but it needs to be in the right location. Now, this change that I had made for optimization did cause, for a couple of days, the issue where the locations weren't updated, and so all your ships that were stowed in lower locations would show as destroyed. But they were there, but they would show
Yeah,
as destroyed.
I had seen that. You can call
I'm gonna
another
take the blame
ship
for that
up.
one. That was me.
And it would come up with the ship that was there.
If a branch falls in a forest and nobody can hear it, does it really? The ship's not technically destroyed, but if it reports destroyed and you can't call it because it
You
reports
can call it.
destroyed, isn't
No,
it
you can call it.
destroyed
Yes,
even if it's not
yes,
destroyed?
Yeah. Well, actually, claiming it would actually destroy it too. So technically, it's destroyed.
Right, but we resolved that one.
Yeah, that one's resolved.
Okay, so let's get back. So let's talk about failing to spawn ships correctly, platforms getting stuck.
Right. So let's talk about hangars first. Right.
Okay.
So, people that play more on the PTU know how the system works, but it's actually a bit special in that, first of all, the hangars are instance. So they're instance on your shard. You have access to your hangar based on
And your party members.
your ownership of it. But all the hangars on a given ATC gateway, so these are the actual hangar doors on the stations, right, are all stacked on top of each other, right? So that's why there's been bugs in the past during the PTU cycles for 4.0 where
You can
hear brother-
somebody else's hangar.
that was
And in
that bug took
4.0,
a while to
dot
fix,
one. It's
because
not
it
fixed.
required technology change. But that was also
I
crazy.
still see
Like, the
people
sound
shooting
was just,
lasers in their own
incredible.
hangars.
And so what that means is that when you're in the station
and ghost ships.
you want to go to your hangar, you have two options. One of them is use the lift. Now we just talked about the lift, right? when you call the lift, it will actually unstow your hangar, create your hangar, and then give you permission to go there, right? Right the moment you hit that button. So there's a lot of things that need to happen in right successions. Then you enter your hangar. There's render culling that comes into play that will make sure that you only see your hangar, even though everybody's on top of each other, that physics only affect you, right? So they're all stacked. Now, one of the big problems that we're dealing with right now, and we've been diving into it for a while, is that the ship elevator, has a couple of issues, right? I've seen, an Avenger rising from the grave through it. I've seen, ships spawning on top of each other, and so there's two problems behind it. The first one is that the platform itself is it's moved, right? It's not a physical movement, so it's not physics driving the movement. The ship is physics enabled. That is a recipe for disaster. Correct. When you see flapping like that, it's like the combination of things, right? And so, we're currently like discussing a solution because there are limitations that the way it's made is the way that they were limited to make it, but we need to fix it. So it's either both elements are statically moved or they're both physically driven. You can't have this combination. That's what causes all these things. So that's why sometimes server FPS is good, performance is good, all your ships are going to go up that platform, everything's great. And some other times, half the ships is in the platform, and that's an issue. So currently we're rechanging the layout and the setup of the hangars to set this up properly so that it never happens again.
Sorry, the dog came in.
The unstow issue is actually, we think, at the moment, a bug where in the timing of how when you leave your hangar, we need to stow back this hangar, right? Because if you go to another shard, we want you to have access to your hangar. The timing of this, if there's a ship on the pad when you leave, there's a possibility in the timing where the ship will be stowed with the hangar instead of being stowed on its own, and then the hangar is clean. And that condition is not properly detected when you unstow the hangar again. And so in the cases where, for you as a player, you're not going to see a difference in that you leave with the hangar on the ship on the pad, you leave your hangar, you come back on another shard, and you just go to your hangar, your ship's going to be on it. But if you call a ship from the station and the ship was carried with your hangar up and down, then the ATC is not going to know that there's a ship on the pad, and he will attempt to spawn it there, and that's where crazy happens. And so currently we're looking at that complete cycle to make sure that the timing is correct. And there's also a couple of other issues related to this. Some corruption of data can happen in that case. And so we have an entire team dedicated to the hangars right now, just making sure these issues get solved, because they're affecting everybody.
When did they
I'm
start
happy
this?
to report, though, that one other
Because
issue
a lot
that we had with the
haven't
hangars
been fixed. But here
got
we go,
solved
maybe
related
something.
to how you exit the hangar. So,
Usually in a ball
The
of flaming
queuing?
wreckage.
well, or after 25 minutes of queuing where the
Yeah.
system tells you, hey, in 100 seconds you'll be able to leave. Right? And so we did hotfix a change to the way what I call
This
the hangar
definitely
queues,
was fixed.
are managed, right? So the ATC manages the queues. It's managing how you exit your hangar, which doors open, stuff like that. And at concurrency, so when a lot of players are in the same location, leaving and entering, this queue and those timers would get completely out of whack. And so it would either grant too much time to someone to leave or enter. We're talking 10x the time, or give you literally 3 seconds to leave. And then players would get stuck in the doors, where the doors would go, and then would try to squeeze in it. The doors would squeeze them out. And then, the rest is a little bit of a party. So we hopefully have something on live already alleviating this, but we're still tracking to confirm it completely that it doesn't happen again.
For the folks that are still in the chat saying, please just give us staircases, the hangars are instanced. The stairs would just still go to, the elevator is a portal between
They're also
the
5K
real
away,
world and your
you
instance
idiots.
world. Even if you spent 5 minutes going up and down stairs, you would still have to hit a portal where you have to queue and push a button and it makes a portal for your thing. It's the same thing. An elevator is just the mechanism. Stairs don't solve it, unfortunately.
Give teleport. It doesn't matter if the thing doesn't
work of
unstow and show up, dude. It
developers and
doesn't
engineers.
make a difference. That's what they're saying.
What's the obstruction tuning and stuff? I saw. I've seen images internally of the elevator won't go down, and then Brett or somebody on player experience or whatever will jump in and go under the thing, and they'll see a dragonfly stuck under the elevator that stops it from going down.
And so the problem we talked about physicalization of the platform is definitely related, because then the obstruction code that will, you can't bring down the ship elevator because there's obstruction, initially was like, if there's like a speckle of dust under that platform, it's not going to move, right? Which was, let's just say, a bit
too aggressive.
Way too aggressive. And so I think at this point we're doing cleanup to just try to stow back. If one of your ship goes on the platform, we'll deal with it and stow it back. But it still needs work to make sure that, even if, I remember one of the early 4.0 preview bugs was like a water bottle would clip through the platform.
Is this making anybody feel
better
better about this year?
So now we're trying to, again, in the interest of self-healing.
I'm like somewhere in
systems,
between.
Right? It's about, let's not just work at preventing the condition, let's also work at what if it happens anyway, right? We need to do aggressive cleanup to keep the system working. Like the hangars, the elevators, the hangar doors, the ATC systems are all part, in my mind, of what I call the traversal of the game, right? And bugs that affect the traversal of the game, that prevent you from going to your ship and leaving, or entering in and refueling,
I feel like if we get some crafting
priority.
Base
right?
building stuff in preview, I could still have fun in that.
Then
it doesn't have to be on live.
Critical.
And lastly,
but I think people have been calling for years to get the current state better.
Correctly, location ID, it's got your name on it.
Well, I've been investigating that one.
Oh, okay.
IDD.
Yeah. You're not responsible.
I'm not responsible for it yet, until proven otherwise. But in this case, the
fixing a problem that requires admitting you have a problem.
You can have more than one hangar in a location of the same size, which should not happen. And when the system gets in this state, it might pick one or the other, which can lead to you not having a hangar at all. So that's the thing that we're trying to find out how it actually happens.
Okay. Second batch of hangar issues.
Sure.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Hangar lifts
I got
that clip player ships and destroy them. Doors not opening and closing correctly. Losing your personal hangar completely. Mm-hmm. And I have the overlapping with the physical audio. We've covered that one. Yep. So hangar lifts that just clip the little tiny corner of my spaceship and make it go explode.
Sure.
What's physicalized there, Benoit?
Well, so I was going to touch a bit on ship cleanup, and not necessarily ship cleanup, but density cleanup in general. We talked about the physics events, right? In the past, earlier in the show, right? So the physics events are a godsend for the server performance, because we evict all these debris that are causing intersections, slowing down physics. And so that's one of the reasons why we've been able to get performance of the servers up in general. Now, one of those components, the same system, is actually responsible for a pink glow that shows up on a ship that will just pop it, right?
The purple ships.
That's part of how we try to resolve the physics intersection for ships, right? And the way it works right now is that it has a smoothed number of frames, where if the physics engine
happens
is
to
like
me randomly.
heavy intersection, at some point it will go like, okay, like something needs to happen. The way we handle that event is still a bit too aggressive right now.
Out in the world.
So, in some cases, it triggers a heavy intersection and will pop out the ship. But we don't want this to happen to attended vehicles ever. And so we're working right now at adjusting that flow so that only unattended vehicles in full intersection for a very long number of frames are cleaned up. And so right now it's a bit too aggressive for this part.
Okay.
But the distinct glow, pink glow, is we added that to make sure we could identify those problems which we expected would kind of happen until we tuned the system properly.
We are at 2 hours.
Wow.
I want to keep going.
Yeah, let's go.
Pete, Dave, Lauren, are you okay? Honestly, I'm not even joking. If you need to go, just leave the camera switched on Benoit.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to see this face anymore. Just leave the camber switched on
I think
Benoit.
one of the
We're gonna
guys
keep
said,
going.
"Yeah, I'm
Are
gonna
you
go
cool?
now," which is fucking
Okay,
awesome.
but seriously, if you do have to go, do it. Just wave and be like, "It's on Benoit. I can see it." I want to keep going.
Yeah.
Inventory and item persistence issues.
Right.
Items are disappearing from inventories.
Oh, we gotta hear
ships,
this one.
And storage
And I'm gonna go
containers.
pee.
This includes bought items, looted items, mission cargo. What's causing this? What are we doing to resolve it?
Well, so
I
on
thought
the
they were gonna
inventory
leave it on
system,
Jared.
right? There's, or I should say on the item system. So the way the entities are tracked, their entities have entity classes that define what they are, right? And there are, I want to say, tags or configurations we can attach to entities for things that we want to automatically clean up, right? Again, we're back on cleanup, right? Because it's important. So, for example, AI, characters will have what we call an auto stow or auto bury policy. Auto stow will bring something back to an inventory after certain conditions are met. Auto bury will destroy an entity if certain conditions are met, right? Automatically. So that's our ability. That gives us our ability to go, this thing is good, let's say for 12 hours, and after that, we can get rid of it. This is true for like debris or things we spawn on the side or things like that. And so a lot of people have reported losing items, for example, from CZs that were acquired in CZs. That's, at that point, it wasn't even a system issue. It was really, those items were flagged to auto-destroy, basically. And so some players looted armor and were like,
But not
started
everybody
using
lost
those armors,
stuff.
and then when the conditions met for the auto-bury, those items disappeared, right? I almost lost this one. And so that was a bad setup, right? And so now I know that a lot of those items have been retagged, right? And so the auto policy will not apply to them, or not if they're attended. Again, it's all about, making sure that the right tags are on them. So that explains some of the inventory things. There was one I was looking into with a player actually recently where when you read your inventory, there's caching going on, right? And when your inventory changes, that cache is supposed to be expired. In certain locations, for some reason, that cache, like especially in CZs, was causing some problems. So opening your inventory in the CZs would be empty, and then you open it again, and then you store something in it, and now other items show up. That's a telltale issue of the cache. So we're actually revamping the
CZ is contested zone
for these elements to make sure it's always consistently updated. Your stuff is there. It's just
It just can't show.
It's cache as nothing. Yeah, exactly.
That was you, Patches.
With long-term persistence, it seems like there's it seems like there's always some level of something disappearing.
Yeah.
Every patch.
Yeah.
What's going
Every
on?
patch.
So LTP is a fairly complicated system, right? But if I can simplify it as much as I can, when you stow something in an inventory, and we take that item and we process it. So let's take a easy example. Let's say a single gun. You have P4. You have a P4. You put it in an inventory that you own. A record is created for it's an ownership record that says this player owns a P4, right? Now these records we write to all the time. If you unstow that gun, meaning you put it in your hands, right? We destroy that record because now it's in play. So you play with the gun and then you stow it back. That recreates the record. So these records should always represent what you've got in your inventory that you own. Now, where it gets complicated is that these things can be hierarchies that contain items that then need to be processed. And so we don't persist everything to LTP. Only a select set of entity classes that designers control will go into LTP. For example, ships is a good example, things like that. Now,
but what happens because we lose them?
When we stow a ship, we look at its entire hierarchy, and there might be things attached or loosely left in the ship that are
Not
LTP.
on the list.
Correct, and now they
Right.
have to be added in. So the also with LTP, there's also sometimes perception issues that things should persist, right? Like for example, a classic case is a ship left in the shard between patches, right? You're flying your ship in 324 and we release 4.0. If you leave the ship there in the shard, right, you don't have an ownership record for it, right? The ship needs to be stowed in order to be there when we recover it. But we do think that there are still issues with some of the recording events in cases where ships are claimed. Because
Absolutely.
at that point, when you join into
People
the next
do
patch,
the steps they tell them to.
let's say you have a
You
ship
still lose it.
you bought with UEC and you store it at a location. That ship actually, its recorded ID comes from your long-term persistent record of that ship. And in the case where you claim that ship again,
LTP
we
needs a
think
joker
that there
card.
might be some cases where the inventory, the record data doesn't follow, and so the LTP record is not recreated. And that could be a source of some of the lost ships in the LTP data. But overall, we're not happy at all with that solution in general. And a bit like you were talking about transit, we want to do a two-pronged approach on this. One of them is we want to find the cases that are left in the current system that don't behave the way we want them, but we're also putting significant effort at a different system for this, which is that we don't want to have to wipe the database at all. So we want to be able to keep your inventories intact between patches and have a forward compatible model where we can actually keep all this data there the way it is, and then
Like checking out
migrate
a
it.
file from Perforce. So you're not destroying it. You're
Correct.
copying it out. Nobody else can write to it. Nobody else can mess with it.
That's right.
It's yours.
Yeah.
And then when you stop it, it goes back. It goes
Correct.
back in. So it's not a non-destructive.
Yeah, and
like
so
checkout system.
and so our goal with this is that's a fairly large endeavor. I mean, like we're not going to fix it in a second.
jokers,
right? We're
they
gonna
are.
still hot patch the current system to make sure that
Some
the
shitty
cases
playing
that we've
cards I
seen
had for training,
are fixed. But the longer term fix is to
and they're all
make
bent.
sure we only persist the data that's going to be compatible. So differentiate between the serialized variables on entities that are important to a ship from those that are runtime only. That's a big difference. So those will be stored in the global database. And between patches, our goal is to just keep that database like this. So there's no, we're getting records back from a thing that was been recording for 3 months. It's like, no, it's the exact same inventory that you have on the live patch and the new patch. So there's no loss at all, right? So that's our target for this new LTP solution.
And those are obvious.
Okay.
Those are bugs and inefficiencies and stuff. There has still always been this. There's been this existing problem. I think it's been here since I've been here, but I think it's really started to really gain steam in like 2017, 2018, and it's been forever. It's this unique item recovery.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure there was even a thread today that reached the top of one of those channels where it's just like, we get all these cool things. You get cool things packaged in with your pledge purchases or whatnot, and then you're too afraid to wear them. You're too afraid to use them.
Yeah, I mean, the new
because
gun nobody wants
you
to
fall
use,
through
right?
one planet. You fall through one lousy planet, and you lose it forever. We're not going to go into it here because there's another show dedicated to it.
Good.
But
Okay.
that is absolutely prioritized this year. It's prioritized in a way that I've never seen it prioritized. The talk is stopped and the work is starting. So we've got a signed off design, and people are on it right now.
And Jared talked about not duping being a thing. The last time he talked about this.
That speaks a little bit to also the change in mentality that we're trying to affect, which is tackling things like this, right, are not just bugs and quality issues, but also playability issues, right, that need to be addressed as well.
It's going to be a 3-tiered solution. Again, we'll have a show where we go through it all. I'm filming with Declan next week on it's like this. There'll be a short term that'll help a lot. There'll be a long term that'll help even more, and then the super long term is crafting
1.0.
and basically you just you get blueprint for everything. You can just make your own, and it's like that, so you never ever have to worry about it. So it's a multi-stage thing, but this first stage just got signed off.
Sounds like
and it's in active
crafting is
development,
fuck all, not even close.
it's just I joke. It's not a joke. I say it with all sincerity that the same conversations the backers have, we have internally just 3 weeks earlier.
100%.
So just never even bother with crafting.
sometimes
Grinding our gears on
Sometimes
this
it's scary.
for everything.
Sometimes it's scary.
So that to see actual movement on this right now is exciting.
Yep.
One last hanger call out before we go. The aggressive ship despawning mechanic.
Yeah.
Sometimes ships are despawned while people are still inside them.
Yeah, that should not happen ever. In fact,
It's nice to hear it said out loud.
No, the system is supposed to be made that we have a passenger count on each of those ship entities, and if there's a passenger, even if he's not piloting, and even if it's not his ship, we should not be despawning those ships at all. And so that's definitely on the lookout right now as to why it happens. I mean, there's a couple root causes. Unfortunately, for it just looks the same, right? Again, if you don't have the pink glow, right? The pink glow is the telltale tells it's physics, right? It's the physics detection, which we're going to ease up. If the ship just despawns out of midair, right? I've seen this happen with ATC. Sometimes
it happened at the Fortune.
With the timer problem
the first
that we
day
fixed
I tested it
before
it
had
was
an
not
issue where it
physics.
could despawn your ship mid-flight when you left, which was egregious. I think that one has been solved, but jury's still out. I want a proper confirmation on it. The one where your ship is considered unattended and you're still in it and it despawns is completely that needs to be solved hotfix right away.
Okay. Mission bugs.
Yeah.
Now we went through a refactor with 4.0 that reduced the mission options, hopefully temporarily, but we're still seeing a lot of the same issues that we saw before.
No markers.
Arriving at a location and having no AI spawn. Mission objectives failing to register, and cargo disappearing upon completion.
How about
the fight for Pyro event
spawning
going on
under the
right
ground?
now is particularly affected, with many players unable to complete it, or various aspects of it due to bugs. Save stat in Chapter 1 was like walking through a minefield trying to figure out which parts worked and which parts didn't. The net 402 has more mission stuff in the content. It's like,
That's such
talk
a
to me
bad
about
idea.
missions.
Sure.
Please. Elliot, this one's for you. I gave you crap on the other one, but I'm doing this for you, man.
Okay.
Help us out.
So let's start at the beginning, right?
Okay.
What did we do in 4.0 for missions, right? So the way missions worked previously is that we had first one server with all the entities.
I'm just going to listen. I got to
the
pee
100
really
players
bad. I'll be
playing
back.
on it. When you played
I can hear
missions,
it.
there was an invisible entity created on the server somewhere. The location doesn't matter, right? That would manage that mission, right? And the way the missions work, if you can picture it in your mind, is that there's a mission management module, and then when you reach certain locations, right, when you stream in that location, a mission module at that location is going to actually kick in and has its own logic for, like, if you're picking up a box, for example, let's say a box delivery mission, you get to that location, there's a mission module that pops up. Does the pickup logic. When you unpick up, it's like, oh, you need to go to this other one. Then there's another mission module at that location. Now that's the way, and then if I add global events on top of that, there's a global events manager on top of that. That was like a global thing on the server. Now I've said global multiple times here. Every single one I said, every single time I said global is not compatible with server meshing because we don't have a global entity setup, right? And so what needed to happen is a fairly large engineering task. I hate
I'm going to chew a little bit.
refactor.
I'm going to mute.
That we branded this as refactor because it's really a new core mission system behind the scenes, which is completely outside of the game servers and does the orchestration of what a mission is, right? And the global flow of a mission. You have something to complete. There are phases, objectives, there's state tracking, there's requirements and rewards, right? And so it's the mission system is what we call it. There's no longer a mission entity that's hold on the server that just manages the whole thing. They all communicate to the mission system that then ticks the logic of the mission forward. Even though all these mission modules, written by the Kid Rock of Mission, can do all kinds of fun things, at each of the different locations. So the fundamental work was to make sure that the mission system was functional in server meshing. That was really the part of the gameplay element that was completely incompatible with server meshing. Another piece that we needed to solve in the build for 4.0 and as part of the mission system is how markers work. And so markers are always a big issue. Have always been a big issue in Star Citizen since the very beginning. And with server meshing, these became even more problematic. So, let me state the problem. You're on a Pyro game server, and I'm on a Stanton game server, but I add you to my party. Now I want a party marker on you, right? My game server doesn't even have your star system loaded. Like, it doesn't even know what's going on, right? And so for that, we needed a piece of technology that would allow the streaming system to stream your entity marker on my server so I could actually see your position changing. And so we've built all of this in place.
But we don't really need to see it
But that's a
changing a
fundamental
ton.
change to how markers work. And
You just need
now
to
I'm going
know
to
that
dive
they're
into
like
why do
on
we
this
have that many
planet.
bugs behind it.
It's almost like we need a replication layer for the mission system itself.
Almost, right? Like for things that are tracking objectives across systems, things like that, right? And so the way we call those things, like the markers, are independently streamable entities, blah, 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 which basically allows us to have a marker on an entity that's anywhere in the server mesh. Now that system works, right? It's in place. It's been fairly reliable, but that touches on all the markers in the game. And so a lot of issues came up for that. And one of the things that we have not tackled with the refactor is how missions are built. And to Elliot's credit, right? I think that
We're using Elliot's name, but there's
I'm
James,
using him on my. There's James. There's
Elliot,
your
Lars,
Fucking get
Nick,
Elliot.
all these guys.
Get him.
So the credit to all these guys, right? We have not provided this team with the right tools to build compelling missions. They are dealing with an archaic scripting system that dates back to a previous era that we are just about
Not
to
the
finish
Rich Tire era.
by replacing to give these guys modern tools and modern
This is cool.
approaches.
Okay.
Going back to markers, the markers are completely managed by game designers and set and removed and displaced and whatever. And that makes for very complicated systems and logic that's not very robust. And so that's why even with a robust marker system, because the markers are managed a bit ad hoc in mission scripts, it makes it really complicated to follow. Like I remember distinctly when we did the golden ticket event, which that was the whole mission, was like there's a marker on the ticket, right? Well now, the holder puts the ticket on his core armor. Now am I tracking the core armor? And then how does that work? And so, and the mission logic had to manage all these cases. And so now that we've kind of finished the foundation for making the mission system function in server mesh, and we're going to obviously keep iterating on making it robust in this setting and fixing the missions to make sure that they also leverage the system properly, bringing back the missions that are missing, but also improving the ones that are there so that they're even more robust, right? We have started the engineering work with the new StarScript Foundation to rethink how missions are made from the get-go, to give Elliot, Nick, James, and all these mission designers the right tools so that they're not bogged down with details. If you saw the way they make missions now, it's like involved, right? And we want to make sure that these guys focus on the flow and not on the functionality they have to build so that programmers can support that content. So when we're talking about this change of focus, we're saying, we're going to deprioritize features. We're also going to prioritize features for content as well, right? So that they can make content that's fun and reliable, so that missions that have been notoriously problematic or events that have been notoriously problematic become fun and reliable, right?
Better mining missions, salvage missions, maybe.
All right. That's going to be incredibly important.
They did try to do repair missions,
especially
didn't work.
For this year,
they tried.
This idea that of a narratively driven, content driven year, if we're not providing, 8 to 10 sexy new features every single patch, when we're now providing, places to go and things to do instead, connected to this narrative. Again, we'll talk more about the narrative on next week's ISC.
The narrative, dude,
Having that mission system
I'm not
seems like
buying
one
it.
of the larger.
I'm not buying into this.
If I were in charge of the priorities, it seems like one of the larger ones. But we actually have some conversation about how you can affect that priority thing at the end of the show. Don't let me forget. Quantum drive.
Yeah.
Quantum travel.
The bug that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
There's a lot of starting and stopping with quantum travel. A lot of repeating the same actions over and over to get something to work. And a lingering issue of fuel states not syncing between meshes or simply vanishing altogether. Where's my quantum fuel, Benoit? And of course, some ships themselves disappear during quantum travel.
Right. A rarer case, but possible.
Do we have our own Bermuda Triangle? What's going on?
Well, yeah, Jens did add some notes here and said, "Oh, if you find the Bermuda Triangle, please
gained
report
fuel.
it on the IC."
I gained fuel today.
Quantum has been, since the very beginning, we put the first meshing test in place. That was the first thing, right? It's like, quantum stops when I cross a server boundary. That's what happens, right? Still. So the same symptom has been, again, triggered by multiple, issues.
You find 5 causes, the 6th one shows up.
Correct, exactly. And the latest ones are related to the resource container. So again, I don't want to dive too deep on this, but like entities have classes that define what they are, and they have components on them that define their functionality. So like, if I have a box with a health component, then the health component manages its health, its damage, and its destruction, right? So the entire game is made like this, with components that define things. And so the quantum drive is made up of multiple components, and these components need to deal with the change of authority when we cross a server boundary. And so there's a lot of entities intertwined for quantum drive to function. Fuel, resource container, and quantum drive. And we've been fixing issues with this transition on these entities nonstop since the beginning, because there would be a fix, then it would work for 2 patches, then a change to how we deal with chum points would come in, and then re-break it, right? And so we are in deep regression on a lot of things, right? And so to solve that, we need a lot more focus on validating the issues. It's like, yeah, we fixed this. Okay, let me try transition 1, 2, 3,
I'm
4.
watching live. It's not about
more. I don't want to say more QA, but more QA. We need a lot more QA to validate the fixes.
I think they should have logging.
We're in the home
whether
stretch.
it fucks the servers
We're in
up
the
or
home
not.
stretch.
I don't care.
How you guys doing?
Still
Again,
here. Cool.
if you need to leave, just, Pete, I'll drive the microphones back to you tomorrow. If you guys need to take off. So a little behind the scenes here. I write a doc, and all the things I want to hit and stuff like this, and I make myself little notes about things I want to remember that I hit.
Put some red
This
stuff.
one just says prisons. I'm tired. What's going on? It's all I wrote for this. Prisons.
I think that's why
I'm
people
tired.
What's going on?
like Pyro, no
So
prison.
prisons is, and I've learned about this in inquiring a bit about the mission, the prison bug, right? Is actually
The prison
a mission.
bug?
And it's a very old mission,
Yeah.
right? So it's a mission module that runs the prison logic. And so for those, I'm sure everybody's familiar, but for those who are not, for some reason, there's a bug that lasted through preview and at the beginning of 4.0, I think, or it was fixed just before that, where if you were a criminal and you got caught and you ended up in Clutcher,
You got what you deserved.
well, I don't know, but you could try the prison escape, which didn't work because the mission logic that drives the prison escape is tied to this. And so the codes weren't outputting correctly. The logic was basically made for the old mission system. It was not ported. That's part of the refactor. And so it basically depended on when you get to that location to give you a new mission instance for your prison experience, which the new system requires that these modules are persistent and stay there, which accumulate the logic change. And so the logic becomes desynchronized with the state of the mission. So what that did is that you would literally do your time, either use smuggled in adenite from somebody else or mine it, pay your due, And then the elevator would look forward to the front, to the prisoner who's paid us, blah, blah, blah. And then you would press the elevator. Again, elevators are back. Press the elevator to leave. And then it would never detect that the action area that you're leaving is actually triggering, which triggered the, leave prison logic, right? And so the guys have done a hotfix for this in preview, actually at the end of the preview, I think, where they've moved the logic for this leave prison flow to the actual law component that's on your character. And so now we're guaranteed that no matter how weird this flow would get, it's actually going to be reliable.
Okay.
You
Is
just
it?
said
I heard people were still getting
you
stuck.
guarantee it's going to be reliable. We are 2 hours and 30 minutes into this.
No.
You just used the phrase, it's guaranteed
All right,
to be reliable?
Let me rewind. It should be a lot more reliable because your player's always streamed in. So I have a fairly good confidence on this fix, as long as the elevator works.
Okay, well, what are we supposed to do with that?
That's a big caveat, Benoit. As long as the elevator... we could sit here for another 2.5 hours and say all kinds of grand things and just be like,
sure.
as long as the elevator works.
Maybe we'll put some stairs in prison. In fact, there are, but you need the prison escape code to get them.
All right, got like 4 more topics. We're done.
Uh-huh.
Mining.
Yeah.
Sometimes minables are taking up to an hour to fully load in,
Who the fuck
making them
sits there
rather
for an hour?
impossible to mine.
Yeah. Mining has been actually a dreaded gameplay loop in 4.0. That's one of the reasons when we did the evaluation, whether 324 or 4.0 preview, whatever, we did take a look at mining. Like, is mining functional? Is mining in the prospector functional? Is mining in the mole functional? Is mining on the rock functional? Is hand mining functional?
Mining on the rock has never been functional.
It actually
it's
was
functional
intermittent in the first report, but
I hate the rock DS.
We've identified what we think is causing this delay. It's basically the conversion from the render node object, because the mining and harvestables are always in large quantities, right? They could be a very large performance hog, and so they're highly virtualized. And so there's a conversion from render node to entity that is, for some reason, very slow.
Yeah.
And so we're diving into try to figure out what's going on, but that's what's happening. So
Been
that's
like
why
this for years.
it takes time for them to show up properly.
There's nothing wrong with the rock DS, people, just with the people who like it. All right, I'm officially tired. The views and opinions of Jared Huckabee do not represent those of Cloud Imperium Games, Roberts Space Industries, or its subsidiaries.
Hey, we didn't talk about the mission reduce strict rep gates.
What's that?
The what?
The reduce strict mission sharing has also been reduced with new strict rep gates.
Yeah. You got to talk
I
about
just thought
this.
that sucked. I didn't think you had an answer for it.
No, I got
Okay.
an answer for it.
All
I
right,
went to the people.
You screwed up mission sharing and the payouts, and it's miserable and it's terrible now.
Well, so there was a bug that caused everybody in a given mission to get the reward for the missions, right? So
And everyone
that means
exploited
if a
and
mission
used
payout was
it.
10K, then everybody would get 10K, everybody participating.
It was amazing.
Well, so
Loved it when that.
So the funny bit is I talked to Rich Tyler about it, and he's like, I couldn't catch it before they fixed it. That's what I want. And so ultimately, it wasn't exactly what we wanted, but that's the direction we want to go in. We want to encourage you guys to play together. And so having those rewards divided is kind of a
I wish I could
counterpoint,
pause right now.
to get people to play together.
Well,
like,
I
why
was
would you
bug
buy group
fixing
with you
in CZs.
if I'm going to get half the payout, right? And so the thing is, like, the system doesn't
I was
work the way
getting
we want it
paid
to do. So
consistently.
the fix did go through, right?
From missions
because
that
it was
I was
an easy
nowhere
fix and
near.
we had the right persons in place to do it. But that's not where we want this to be. We do want to improve that part.
We're at 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
And talking about all the bugs that still need to be fixed.
correct.
And the one bug we did fix was one we didn't want to fix.
I know, it's crazy, right? It's a train.
You know, I challenge you. Whatever you think about
This game is all
the project
faucets,
or me or Benoit
no
on the
sinks.
show, you've never seen an episode of any kind of dev communication like this from any other game developer. Nobody's ever
Escape
been
from
willing to
Tarkov
sit in a chair for 2.5 hours plus.
I think
and be
Escape
grilled
from
about all this.
Tarkov says hold my beer, but okay.
So, all right. Just two more or three more. Three more subjects. Three more subjects.
We got mining done.
Three more subjects. Yeah.
What's the next one?
Vulcan.
Yeah.
And NVIDIA driver issues.
Yeah.
So players who are using Vulcan with the latest NVIDIA drivers are reporting graphical artifacts and crashes. I know some of these crashes were seen from third-party softwares. What was that one that we found one guy who had like 40 instances of the same crash and it was all linked to this third-party thing he was using?
Oh, was that Reshade on this?
Was it Reshade? It was called something else. I can't remember. Overall, what can you tell us about what's happening with Vulcan and the NVIDIA drivers?
Well, so we're still investigating the cause, but for now, right, we think it's related to a specific driver version from NVIDIA related to the upgrades for the 5090 cards. So we're not quite sure exactly, but it is definitely, when you update your NVIDIA drivers, there are two drivers, one for Direct3D and one for Vulcan. It doesn't look like it, but there are two. And so we think that there's an issue related to the latest version of the driver for Vulcan specifically. And so you could downgrade your drivers and it probably solve the issue in the meantime, but we're still investigating to make sure it's completely not, related to this. But we've been investigating other games are also having the same issue. And so we're,
there was one or two drivers ago where I saw somebody, they had glowing heads. All the character heads were glowing and stuff, and they were on Vulcan.
We don't think it's a third-party app in this case, though.
Yeah, no, that was just one instance we were chasing down. I was watching.
You do need to be careful with third-party apps that inject into the 3D pipeline for multiple reasons. One of them being that the ESC sandbox can catch it, but also because they can cause GPU crashes. So,
all right. The last two are about how we make these things better. Issue council. So,
don't give rewards for people.
Issue council has bugs. Issue council has some issues with it. Players are talking about the effectiveness and usability of the issue council. I've seen them expressing frustration with the dupe system and suggesting improvements to the reporting process. There is significant discussion about the difficulty of reporting recurring bugs that have previously been marked as fixed. Why is this happening, and how do we address this going forward? Well, these are the folks who are trying to help us.
The first thing I would say is that the issue council at CIG is of extreme importance, right? Even though for players, if you don't feel like your issues being actioned or that there's retroaction from the team, you can be certain that we have, especially Bayer's group is at the forefront of this, but issue council reports are significantly of high quality in general when they do pass the filters, of course, right? And so we use that data every day, right, to confirm issues. A lot of the issues we have on our famous directors list that I just talked about are not internal JIRAs. They're IC reports, right? And so that process is super key for us.
Every time
it's a very difficult
wants to fix a bug that I talk to, they ask for an IC report
process, though, because the level of effort put into reporting is not necessarily of smooth like the quality range is large, is what I'm trying to say. Some reports are like game no work, others are like extremely filled with evidence and those are the ones we want, obviously. We do want to improve the dupe system. So I've seen several backers on the ETF and elsewhere that are very active at calling out dupes. And for now, I think that their voice are kind of modeled by people saying, oh, I can reproduce, right? Instead of saying, oh, I confirmed this dupe, right? So we're actively looking at how we can improve that flow, because that's a major, like when we identify a duplicate, it's a major win, right? So when you contribute to the issue council, a new report is, depending on the issue, right, takes a lot of effort for it to reach us because you need to get reproductions on it. Reproducing another issue is a great contribution, but identifying a dupe is probably the best contribution you can make because that helps us a lot. And for now,
they're doing it falsely.
So we want to change the
people are falsely doing it
a lot more,
because you give them free ships.
Sure. But
for the most dupes reported,
and the upvotes have historically been used, but in this new process, we're also trying to lean into this a lot more. And so the please fix hammer button, right, to upvote an issue, we're going to try to give it a voice and actually make some of the internal discussions we're having, I can share some thoughts if you guys are interested, or even to have community identified issues directly in the directors list, like make the community a director in this list.
There's also some amount of things being marked dupes that aren't dupes.
Sure.
It's people are moving fast. Some people think they've seen that before or whatever, or they think this is the same thing as that, but it's not.
No, call
it's
it
just
what
in
it
the
is.
same ballpark.
They're trying to get a free ship.
There's also this.
Call it what it is.
There's also this thing that happens where things are getting marked duped and they're not duped, and that's I don't know how you battle that.
No, well, that's a balancing act, right? That's why, for now, I feel like the dupe markers are kind of more experienced, testers that are helping us. And
makes me hear the statement more.
Right, will happen.
You could go
typically
watch
when
the
we
live
actually
stream right now
intake
on their
a bug,
channel.
right, from the community, and we're going to try to repro it internally. That's where we're like, oh, it's been marked as a dupe, but it actually is a new symptom, or it's the same.
Right
case as
here.
another
You can
one.
go hang out with these people. Okay?
Do you think there's some amount of... Is
They're
it possible
cringe.
that there's some amount of semi-malicious intent there? People who are farming dupes or using bots or whatever, because as I know there are incentives for participation
Thank
in
you,
the
Jared.
IC and stuff like this.
Right.
Obviously, we incentivized the use of the issue council because it was incredibly important to our to the way that we make the game. But any incentive
Sure.
tends to be weaponized in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
So, have you seen evidence of this? Is this?
No, not so far, right? Not so far as to say like, oh yeah, there's this going on, right? The worst things that we've seen so far on IC would be things like brigading a specific issue, right? And that's why also we've
so
been kind of
obvious,
careful
dude.
with rewards to the issue council. It's not because we don't want to reward players that are doing stuff there. Like we are doing some of them, but we're always trying to stay asynchronous.
There's literally a dude
so
using
that
a
you can't
script.
go, oh, they're going to reward for this, so I'm going to go and create reports, or I'm going to create dupes, or I'm going to create whatever.
It's
I'm not making this up.
obviously
I'm sorry.
you're the
I'm
person
not
who would know.
making
It's
this
not
up.
that I don't believe it. What I've seen,
Sure.
and what I'm reading in chat right now. Would you commit to maybe taking a look at that and maybe seeing
Sure.
if
Thank you. Even their chat's saying
maybe
the
it
same
is
thing.
being
Absolutely
manipulated?
Yeah, I can absolutely look at
It 100% is.
especially if there's a sense that that's happening. Yeah.
Yes, Apple Tango. It's the best part about living in the UK.
I've never had that. Actually.
Obviously we're not covering every bug, every topic in
No.
the thing. It's,
Well,
we've done more than
more hours.
We've done more than any human being in the world. I've never seen this look on David's face before. Like David was a kind and jovial spirit,
and now he's like down.
and now he's like, like I'm gonna pay for this.
Yeah.
The error codes themselves, famously,
Yeah.
30K could mean 40 different things, 50 different things, 60 things. We have made progress. We've absolutely made progress. But even that 630 is that's not just one thing. There's multiple causes for even the 630 and stuff like this.
Of course.
Are there any initiatives in place to help this drive down? Anybody who's
I don't
working
care
in
about
IT, I worked
this
in IT
personally.
for 20 years before I came here.
I
Everybody
don't need
knows
to
that
know why I crashed. I
the
fucking
worst errors are the
crashed.
ones where you
It
can't
sucks.
rely on the error code, and you're never going to get 100%.
This might be an
You're never gonna
internal
get
thing.
to a point where every single error code is just going to spell out to you everything that's exactly wrong.
Yeah, credit to Jared for
But
asking
I feel
that
like there's
duping question.
There's still improvements we can make.
Absolutely.
We're not at that point where there's nothing more we can do.
No.
So what are we doing about it?
Well, so on error codes, the error codes, I'm gonna go and merge pop-ups into that, right? Because I mean, the error pop-ups date back to the very original start of the project. Like nobody's touched these things in forever, right? So the nicely misaligned cancel button is my favorite pet peeve, right?
Why haven't we fixed that button?
Well, we're fixing it. So we actually have a
He pulled
CL
a
right
Joker
now
card.
to change all these pop-ups to make them at least readable, and aligned, right? So we start with that. But
No, you start with the elevators, then you fix the button.
So the error codes themselves, right? So there's already good categorization for issues. So every kind of like 30,000 errors, 40,000 errors, 60,000 errors are all like families of errors. Unfortunately, over the years, we've added more systems, we've grown the infrastructure, and there's a lot more causes for exit or fatal errors than there are actual code assigned in those categories. And so what we're doing now is kind of seeing if we can surface more information. 30,009 is typically related to your character during login, but there's a million causes that could cause a 30,009, whether it's that shard can't outstall your player, or your player is missing a component, or, and we're trying to surface more of that so that there's more of these cases so that you can, as a player, know a bit more about it. Also, the wording for some of those errors are being revamped because, they're not always very clear. And we're trying to...
I want to do that shocked bird gif right now. Continue.
Correct. And so adding more details and more granularity to our error codes, changing the wording, making sure they're more effective at representing what they are, and eliminating a bunch of there's a couple cases where we fall to a default error code for kind of unknown conditions. That's what we need to flesh out, is like the unknown. What is the unknown condition? Try to surface more error codes from the other systems to get more of that information in place. So we need more clarity on that side, so that players like, oh, I got a 19K error. What does that mean, right? Like I go in Spectrum a lot in the SC testing chat, and I see players going like, what's the fix to 19K errors, right? And a 19K raw error is like your client can't talk to the backend service at all. So it's typically a client-side problem, firewall, machine connectivity, something like that. But the error message itself is really unclear, right? It's like, oh, we failed to log you in, right? Well, what can I do as a player to fix that, right? So we're trying to get a lot more clarity on these error messages. That's part of like the improvements of these things.
So they're trying to be like,
plaguing us
give
forever,
you the
these goddamn pop-ups.
Workarounds? That's your one.
With these goddamn pop-ups.
Hey, you want a funny one? Like, here's a funny one on these pop-ups, right? Because we're all complaining about them, but we lost those pop-ups during the 4.0 preview, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody was having a black screen. Everybody was complaining about a black screen. It's like, I get a black screen, right? Well, what actually happened is that someone that I shall not name, right? But the developer fixed another issue where when you die, we need to move the camera and move your character, and it looks like crap, right? So we didn't want to see that. And so the way to solve that was to fade out the game UI, including the pop-ups. That was it, And so in this case, it was if you got disconnected,
but the UI was
then
still
the pop-up
there.
would go fade to black.
It was definitely Elliot.
Right. Serenity now.
All right. So we're here.
Yeah.
We're at the end.
This was raw game dev.
Going forward, I touched on this about halfway through, but going forward, with a focus on stability, performance, and content this year. This means less time available, fewer resources spent, and no patches dedicated specifically to new features. It's not that new features won't come out or they're not being worked on the background, just that instead of 10 to 15 people working on them, there's now a much smaller group, and the time, we're not going to time lock it into specific things. Okay. We're going to make good on the promise we made back with 3.0, quite honestly. Star Citizen has been this heavily feature-driven project in the past.
It doesn't mean no base
every
building.
3 months or so.
Doesn't mean no crafting.
A patch with a bunch of new features comes out that brings people back. They come in, they see new features. It's this cycle that's existed for so many years, and we're stopping that now. And we're focusing on.
Well, we're probably not getting any of those.
And quality of life. And all no more. It's just from a marketing standpoint. These trailers where it's like this feature, this feature, this feature, this feature, this feature. Like those days are not here this year. That's not what this year is going to be about. So this thing I'm excited and I'm scared at the same moment. If I'm being completely honest,
scared. I think this might kill the company.
We've never seen what a content-driven, stability-focused year of Star Citizen is like.
It
It's
legitimately
going to be
could.
different. And like anything else with Star Citizen, it's going to change and evolve over the year because
How are
somebody
they
will
gonna
have
make
an
money?
idea in April and we'll tweak this, and somebody will have another idea in June and we'll tweak this. So all we know is that it's going to be different. It's going to be different, hopefully better, but it's not what we've done before. Do you think this is scary? And more importantly, why is now the time for the change?
Well, I think first of all, it is very scary, right? Because it's a change of how we've been doing things forever, right? Which is like a focus on transformational change to the game, and constant evolution. Whereas now we're focusing on hardening.
People
and
who want this
playability
pledged
and
already?
looking at,
No.
what players are doing in the game.
people who
and going,
haven't
like, everybody's
pledged
hitting this
need
problem.
this.
Like, and then it's not just the voice and the side is like, hey, we should fix this, right? It's like, no, we're fixing this. Like every director in the company is going to be on top.
That's the other
top duty
thing.
for this, right?
In the short term, I'm talking about
But
money-wise.
what's scary is that
But the people who haven't pledged, that's who this
how
is
did
for.
Jens frame this for us? He said that stability and performance heightens hunger for new content and new features.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the part that's scary. That if we do achieve what we're set to achieve,
You're going to notice that there's nothing in the game.
we're going to need features as well.
No
right?
economy.
It gets to that
No
point,
crafting.
then everybody's going to try and say,
No,
there's
nothing to fight
do
over.
now. It's
That's
The
it's
sushi
exactly what's
restaurant
gonna happen.
Analogy, right?
yeah.
But it just has to be done. And the reason why it's time to do this is because...
but it has to be done.
Like Chris said it in his letter, that's the part that resonated the most to me, is like, we all acknowledge that if the game that we have now functioned the way it's supposed to, it'd be a great game, right? And that's what we want.
I don't
We
know
want
if it'd be a great game.
That
He
we
said
can build
a
on,
unique experience.
and pass
and that's
a
the
road to get us out of alpha.
that's what SC is.
And that's why it's time now. That's why we're committing to this.
It's a special experience.
One thing.
Not a great game
We've
yet.
obviously spent a lot of time. We've obviously spent a lot of time here. Sorry, Pete. I took my hand off my face. Audio guys, just like, stop talking into your hand. I'm tired. If there's one thing you want to make sure people take away from this today, the letter in December, all of the refocusing and restructuring that's going on now, and from this, admittedly, a lot of talk. The proof will be in the pudding over the next year.
Yeah.
What do you want people to take away from today?
I mean, I think I want players to know that we know about the state of the game. We're not oblivious to it. We really care about making the work of our teams shine. And we're going to work our ass off to get this game stable and solid and to be the game that we want to be. I think
the people that are in charge now care.
Well, Spirit Wolf,
We don't know if they
655
did
in
before.
chat says pure BS.
All right.
Trying, guys. Benoit, thank you so much for taking your time to be here. Folks don't know this. There was the entire CTG team is here for the annual summit. There was a big celebratory party for launching server meshing and finally getting out the door. It's happening right now. It started right as we went on the air, and Benoit, chose to be here to do this instead. He chose to be here for 3 hours and face the tough conversations. Yeah, we're just about 3 hours. Damn. Thank you so much. I gotta thank David, Pete, and Lauren for sticking it out. This is not what I sold them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I said, come
Thank
help
you
me make the show.
to everybody who put this on, I guess. Right?
The community team and the player experience team are going to put up a thread on Spectrum where they discuss many of the pressing issues that we talked about today, and they're going to have you vote on which ones you think are most pressing. Obviously, we have our own internal
master modes
prioritization. We've talked about the directors list and stuff like this, but it was an initiative that was really important to the top leadership. We wanted to know what you guys are thinking and what you guys are doing. So look for that. I'm not sure when it's going to go live or in what subsection. Just check it out on Spectrum. It'll be up. Thank you again. And
hopefully I don't get flamed by the game
elevators
for my details. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see if I've still got a job back when I go to that thing. Let's see. I want to say one more thing before we go. This is give me a minute here.
And Vince, they're human beings. Like, I don't know.
this is going to be a real change of topic here. In November, for IAE show episode 3, we released this puppet song that John Crew and I did, that I wrote, and this thing that I've been dreaming about. Kat, our fantastic creative director for the project, made it all happen, and so like this. And it was one of the things I was most proud of. And about an hour after that episode went live, on November 28th, I called my dad. Those who have followed the project for a while know my dad is a Star Citizen. Ever since that random day in 2017 when I got a text message, "Hey son, when is the Cutlass Red? Get this," or whatever. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? My family is not supposed to be involved in this thing. He's been a Star Citizen for a long time. I called him up because it was one of those things that I knew would make him proud and it would make him laugh. And it did. He answered the phone in a hospital bed. There was nothing to worry about at that point. He just felt a little weird. At his age, they would take precautions. And he assured me everything was fine. We watched it together and we laughed and everything was great. And we said goodbye and we talked about how excited we were to see each other at Christmas. About an hour later, he had the first of a series of heart attacks.
Oh, God.
And on December 9th, after a week of convincing me that I did not need to rush out there because he was going to be okay and everything, he passed away. And when I went back, and I'm doing all the things that a son has to do when their father passes away,
which nobody wants to do.
I'm going through his records and making sure everything. What I discovered was I knew he liked Star Citizen. I did not understand the breadth of involvement that he had. He retired. He retired from the Army and from the Corrections Service and from Homeland Security and all the things he did over his life. And he became a professional Star Citizen. His Discord was full of over 100 unread DMs. And as I went through them, they were all talking about Star Citizen. He was in at least 14 different Star Citizen Discords. He was in a number of organizations, and he was an officer in several. And he was able to do that because of you. I didn't talk about Star Citizen with him. We had a standing rule that when I came home for holidays and whatnot, he was not allowed to ask me a question about Star Citizen until after dinner was done and the plates were done. It was really important to me to have one aspect of my life that was not completely consumed with Star Citizen, and I made that my family. His engagement with this project was all because of you. There were Star Citizens at his funeral. There were Star Citizens at his wake. And not the worst Star Citizen I've ever been to. But what I came away with is just a profound appreciation for many of your roles in his life. His retirement was playing with you. So many of you, names I see in the chat, I saw in the chat today, which is why I'm saying this now. So, from me, personally, thank you
for
being there
closure
for him
too
when I wasn't able to be.
Yeah.
And you made the last 6-7 years of his life some of his happiest. So, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching. Thank you for playing Star Citizen. Thank you for being the community that you've always been. Even the ones that call out total BS. You're all appreciated. That's it for this show. Tune in next week. There's a BTS episode and an ISC episode about something. I can't even think about what they are anymore.
Who cares?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.
Ooh, that's a way to end it. I don't know what to think. They're rating somebody, so make sure that I mute this. I don't know what to think. Obviously, I mean, that's a tough way to end it. And condolences to Jared and just made me think about my grandfather. We saw him, and a day later he was gone. We went and visited him for his birthday. My dad was there. While my dad was on the plane going back home, he died. Right? So it's like, you know, you think everything's fine and then it's not. It's just like crazy. So, yeah, I don't know. Brought back all those memories, and it's just fucking horrible. But I know how much Dad Lando loved Star Citizen too. So yeah, it was. He would always be at the events and stuff, and Jared would always bring him up, and it's so sad. But about the Star Citizen thing, what an unknown year. This is gonna be a weird year, and it's gonna be a different one, and we don't know how it's gonna go. But I think everyone, for the most part, would be in agreement that tackling some of the long-standing issues and at least getting them at server meshing, working with that stuff is kind of necessary, and we'll see. So, yeah, time to stop the bleeding. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, and we'll see what happens if another cut spouts open or something like that. But feels like it has to be done, but we won't know until they start doing it. So we'll see what happens. Again, a lot of talk today. We'll see what sort of action comes out of it. But that's where I'll leave it. Hopefully it's a better year, but I nothing necessarily about the show gives me any confidence until we start seeing the like, I don't know if I feel optimistic or positive or negative. I don't feel anything except for anticipation to see what this looks like. I feel anxious. That's what I feel. I feel anxious to see what this iteration of "we're going to be better this time, guys" actually looks like. And we'll see what it means. Like I see Expat say, I feel damage control. Damage control would not be a good thing. So is damage control what it is? Or is it we actually care about the game and we want the game to be good? What does it end up being? What does this mean for content creators? Who cares? I mean, I see you have TV in your name, so maybe you care, but the only thing that'll matter for content creators is if the game is good. In the grand scheme of things, like literally nobody cares about your content creator problems. So sharing them, nobody that's watching you actually cares. So as a content creator, if you're new to it or you're not, I don't know if you need to hear this or not, but if you're new, you probably do. Nobody cares about your content creator problems. No one. They only care about you making good content. They want to come to your stream or your YouTube channel and have a decent time. And that's it. They do not care about your individual problems with making content. They're just hoping to come to a stream and have a good time. That's really it. That's right, Ollie. No one cares. But you'll find that out very quickly. The downfall of I've seen it come and go. Oh my God, I'm not making enough money. What am I going to do? And guess what happens? You get like some subs for like a week, and then that channel ends up not streaming anymore. Right? So nobody really cares. They just want to come to a stream and have a good time. However that good time looks. And I think that's where I'll leave it, because I just want to come to Star Citizen and have a good time. And it sounds like that's what they want to do. And we'll see if that happens. And we'll just leave it there. Right? It sounds like we both want the same things. And we'll see. So that's a good spot to leave it. And yeah, I guess we'll leave this video here, and then we'll raid somebody.